Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались з кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Хотите жить – бегите. Хотите жить – сдавайтесь в плен. Россия не получит новую территорию Украины. Россия присоединит себя к той катастрофе, которую она принесла на оккупированную территорию нашей страны. Оккупант заполняет могилами захваченную территорию Украины. И все больше могил на территории самой России. Ценой того, что один человек в России хочет продолжать эту войну, кто хочет войны больше, чем жизнь. Вашей жизни, граждане России.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt. And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 609 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And Israel is on the warpath. They are fully committed to the invasion. Big news tonight. And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine and in the Middle East. And once again, I am going to take a couple of nights to remind everyone that we are having two strictly separate segments for each bit of news. Most times, unless if the Middle Eastern news takes precedent over the Ukraine news will always come first, and then the Middle Eastern news will come afterwards. I just want to make sure that we put that out there clearly, because of course, this is a bit of a larger change in how this channel has been able to run its news over 609 days, and I want to make sure that everyone knows how we're going to be covering the news. So if you are here for the Middle Eastern news, stick around, because in about an hour's time, we will certainly be getting into that news and the major developments in that region today. For example, what is clear indications that the U.S. is certainly preparing for the war in the area. But moving on into the Ukraine war news today, we have seen, starting off, that once again, the public in Russia is becoming unsettled by the massive amount of casualties that are being taken by the Russian armed forces inside of Ukraine. And we saw in an unknown location in Russia that another plea has been made by the families of the mobilized to ask for them to return, or to ask for just simple help in general.
Мы родственники, жены.
We, the relatives, wives, and mothers of the mobilized men, ask you to help our men that, by order of the commander of the 40th Tank Division, Colonel Akimov, and Lieutenant General Abachev, the 2nd Battalion of the 347th Regiment, which includes the mobilized men, was sent to the front line from October 13th to 14th at night without proper training and weapons, nor was there any opportunity for the men to entrench themselves. There are wounded and dead as a result, as reported to us by the wife of the commanding officer. The command is trying to destroy the 2nd Battalion with a criminal order. There is no support from the 40th Division's command. We demand to get to the bottom of this critical situation. Every minute counts towards the location of the battles. I won't name it. We demand that the perpetrators be urgently investigated and punished. Orders are coming from Military Unit 54096, 47th Armored Division, Molino, from Lieutenant General Abachev, and the commander of the 40th Armored Division, Colonel Akimov. These individuals are sending our men to slaughter. Remember the 347th Regiment. We're really asking for help. And the video clip...
What do they think? They live in a democracy all of a sudden or
Yeah,
something?
I mean, what the hell do they think this is? America? Do you think people are going to actually listen to you there? And it's something interesting to note that while no one's going to listen to them, that they're once again complaining. And we know where the 347th is. They are currently involved in the Battle of Avdiivka, and it's showing how poorly things are really going, considering that the commander of the brigade's wife told the family members of soldiers in the unit how badly things were really going and how many lives are being lost by the Russian armed forces in that area today. But moving on...
I have a feeling that commander's wife and also the commander is probably going to be in a load of trouble after that video.
Probably so. I would put money on it. They're probably going to be in some hot water, as they say. But, you know, we'll have to wait and see if we get any news about the purges going on here in the future. But moving on from that and into the area of Avdiivka, we also got to see that a Russian BMP had been hit and was boiling out in the field. We can see that right there. And from what we can tell in the picture, it appears to be a BMP-2, and the fire started in the engine bay, and in the clip, it had spread over to the commander and driver's position, well, actually the driver's position, at the front part of the BMP-2, burning it on out and taking it out completely. While the losses have been incredibly high today in the Battle of Avdiivka, from what we can understand, we didn't really get a lot of video and picture evidence of that part of the front line showing us the exact situation that is currently evolving there. We did see, however, a Ukrainian T-64 driving by some forces that were a little bit farther behind the lines, as it's most likely going to be getting involved in some heavier operations defending the area from the Russian onslaught. When you see some MRAPs have been pulled alongside the road to wait for the passing of the T-64, which we can see right here. And there goes the T-64 passing on by and moving its way towards the front lines. We see a lot of Ukrainian soldiers taking the moment to film the occasion and also film the inside of the armored car, and the video ends there. But showing us that Ukrainian forces, at least in this one clip in very small form, are moving into the area into larger numbers to make sure to defend against the Russian push. From what we saw over the past 24 hours, we've also seen that the Russian push has started to peter out strongly, as they were not able to make any ground today. In fact, over about the past 24 hours, it appears that they have lost minute amounts of ground around the area of Krasnoarivka, and specifically around the slag heap, which is just to the north and east of the coke plant that we see at the northern side of Avdiivka. It does appear that Ukrainian forces have been conducting a concerted defensive effort in the area behind the town, and it does appear that it's proving to be successful in stopping Russian forces from moving forward. This delaying action will most likely be used by Ukrainian forces to further fortify and defend positions around the area of Stepove and down towards the coke plant, so that way when Russian forces once again are able to advance, because they most likely will, although it will be under heavy fire and taking heavy casualties, the Ukrainians will be able to ensure that these Russian forces hit a brick wall and practically get stopped in their tracks once they begin to cross the railroad burn. But nevertheless, the Battle of Avdiivka is continuing on with, like I said, incredibly high losses. And that was no better seen than in the casualty report from the day. The casualty report today was, of course, as high as many other days, with only one Bobcat skid steer being lost.
Oh, yeah!
Oh yeah, baby! And
I have no idea why I did that. There you go.
We also saw that 800 Russian soldiers were wiped out over the past 24 hours, along with another impressive 28 armored personnel carriers, 27 supply trucks, 7 main battle tanks, actually a somewhat lower number, but still quite high compared to the norm. And we also saw that 44 artillery pieces have been lost as well, along with 9 drones, 5 MLRSs, 1 cruise missile, and 2 anti-aircraft warfare system batteries. Overall, the Ukrainians have once again been ensuring that their defensive efforts have been inflicting the heaviest casualties as possible on Russian forces, and it does also appear that the amount of Russian dead, according to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense reports, will finally be passing 300,000 probably here within this next week. Moving on from that little bit of the location unknowns in the casualty report, we have seen that failures in Russian offensives have been going on in many areas around the front lines. Avdiivka is the largest Russian offensive ongoing right now, but there have been microscopic level offensives occurring near the area of Kupiansk and also in the Kremenna forest that appear to have resulted in no meaningful advances and no meaningful ground gained over about 3 weeks at this point since both of those offensives began. It does appear that the Russian army has completely lost its ability to conduct any offensive operations. That was quite clear since the beginning of last year, pretty much at the very beginning of the war, and it's becoming evidently more clear as we see the failure at Avdiivka, which is being conducted by the regular Russian army rather than a private military company like the Battle of Bakhmut was, and we can also see that in the smaller offensives happening near Kupiansk and Kremenna. Speaking of the northeastern front, we did see a small amount of action taken by Ukrainian forces today against those very Russian forces that are attempting to push forward towards the city of Kupiansk, as a Ukrainian tank was slamming Russian trenches that the Russian forces were hiding in while trying to prepare for their next small push. Well, you see that clip right here. Alright, we're going to mute that, but we see the Ukrainian tank firing at point-blank range as the sounds of the devil play in the background. And we can see it driving right up onto the Russian trenches and hitting them point-blank range. I'm assuming that this is probably dealing a decent amount of damage, in the words of Billy Mays, on these Russian forces. Sadly, OxyClean...
I think they call that literally death metal while they're dishing out the death.
But anyways, moving on from that, still nice to see that the Ukrainian tankers are taking matters into their own hands to get the action right up on the Russians, so that way they're not missing out on a single bit of this war. Moving on from that and into our next clip in the area, we also saw some Western armored personnel carriers on the move, once again showing that the presence of Western equipment is quite high currently inside of Ukraine. We can see here in this first picture a CV-90-40, probably one of my favorite armored personnel carriers out there. The design is incredibly contemporary, very sleek, and from what we understand, these can also be outfitted with anti-tank guided missile systems if need be, which is called the Stridsvagn 9040 Bill, which is, I don't know what the Bill part's for, but nevertheless, it does equip an anti-tank guided missile of a Swedish variety. In the next picture, we can see it being quickly followed up by a YPR-765, a Dutch variant of the M113, and we can also see that it has a little cope cage mounted all the way around its exterior. It is encompassing the entirety of the top insides of this APC. And usually, I would deride the use of a cope cage on most vehicles, for example, anything with a movable turret of a very large size, like a CV-9040 or a main battle tank. Usually, the cope cages actually get in the way of the maneuverability of the turret, and also it makes it very difficult for the crew to bail out once the vehicle is hit. With the YPR-765s, that isn't necessarily an issue, as the large swing-open back door largely ensures that if anything happens to the vehicle, as long as that door is unobstructed, the entire crew can bail out quite easily if need be. So the cope cage on this vehicle is actually a well-needed addition, also considering that it has paper-thin armor. Moving on to the next picture, we can see another CV-9040. This one appears to have the same camouflage layout as the last one, and in the next picture we can see even another CV-9040, showing us that the YPR-765 was apparently something of a little bit of an outlier. But finally, in the last picture, we can see what the caption says is an Australian-provided M113 AS4. And once again, M113s are incredibly common the world over. It's actually one of the most common armored personnel carriers that the Israeli army is going to be using in their ground invasion in Gaza. We'll be getting to that here in a little bit. But still, nice to see that the Ukraine is using a large amount of contemporary and up-to-date armored personnel carriers, and some slightly older ones, but still adding to their ability to transport large amounts of troops across the battlefield and provide them with a small amount of support. Beyond that, the northeastern front has largely been quiet today, as usual. The northeastern front is probably one of the oddest parts of the front line inside of Ukraine, because the amount of frontline activity there is largely non-existent for the most part. And even when it is, the amount of frontline changes because of those frontline actions are also almost non-existent as well. But moving on from that area and towards the direction of Kramatorsk, we did get to see that a Russian missile was intercepted today by Ukrainian air defense, which apparently successfully intercepted the incoming Russian missile. Here's the clip. And we're going to be muting that because they, of course, have some pretty good music. We see the missile fly right overhead of the camera. You see it flying on off into the distance with the green crosshair lining up to it. We see it's now fired a surface-to-air missile of some sort. I don't know what this is, but it's flying around quite erratically. I don't know if they've been able to equip a man-pad onto a drone. And we see the camera quickly bobbing around, and it appears that there's been an explosion in the field, which we assume is from the missile that just got shot down by the man-pad. Although the camera footage is so shaky, it's really hard to see.
And what is this targeting system we were looking at? Is it like a thermal imaging camera, like mounted to what?
I have no idea. I think this is mounted to a drone just from how shaky the footage is. And it's also quite high up off the ground, so I'm assuming that it's probably not a tower, because I wouldn't believe that a system mounted onto a tower would be able to get 360-degree coverage like this. So apparently,
like the camera's moving around like it's like on some kind of like something. I don't even know how to describe it, man. That camera's jumping around like crazy.
It's got to be a drone. Because
It
notice
might
it's
be
also
handheld. It looks like it's on the ground.
well, the tree line's down there, so unless this guy's like 120 feet tall, it would be really hard for it to be a guy. But when you said that, man, he was like, oh, there's the trees.
I'm not sure if those are trees. I think that might be maybe brush or something. I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure that's a tree line down there, because if we look at that again, earlier on, you can see the outline of the trees right there. And then when the missile's fired, the camera pans down, and you see down there into the fields, there's ruts in the fields, and then there's also a tree line over there. It looks like a fairly normal Ukrainian field. And also, are those little soldiers right there? Yeah, those are actually soldiers right there. You can see the outline of a Ukrainian soldier standing down there. So whatever this is, it's a drone that's firing off this manpad. Never seen this before, so I have absolutely no idea what kind of drone this is or what the manpad is that it's using. But nevertheless, it seems as though it is being used successfully. And so, pretty interesting. Still just a very odd bit of footage here, but great to see that they were able to intercept the incoming missile. Moving on from that and into the area of Seversk, we can also see another manpad shooting down another Russian drone in a very similar area. We can see that right here. We can see the missile on its way, and it hit.
Now that's impressive. That is very impressive to see that in action.
Oh, quite nice. And also, what kind of manpad was that? The normal AIM-92 Stinger. A very impressive manpad, of course manufactured by yours truly, the good old US of A, and it's wonderful to know that American equipment, like the Stinger, has continuously proved itself to be the #1 drone killer over there in the war in Ukraine. Moving on from that, and out of the northeastern area entirely, it's now time for us to move on down into the area of the Battle of Bakhmut. The Battle of Bakhmut has largely been an unproductive one as far as video and picture evidence has gone, and we can see that over the past 24 hours, there have been no frontline changes recorded by Deep State UA, and at this point, we are crediting Deep State UA with being entirely accurate in this area because the consistent amount of a lack of a frontline change shows that today's report is most likely 100% accurate as well. The only clip we got from this area was the Ukrainians capturing a Russian soldier and then taking him back behind the lines, which we saw right here. We caught a boar today! Peace sign. I don't know if we need
a strange-looking boar.
Man, that thing does not look like boar's head cheese, man. F, he is pissing! Oh my lord, oh no. Are you a complete fool? Why did you just say you want to piss? Our car is all pissed on. Oh, bleh. Oh my lord, the guy pissed on the freaking car. Dude, he's like Uncle Leo in Seinfeld who pissed on the couch. Oh my lord.
It's funny, while the camera was like off of him, he somehow ended face first on the ground. While they're talking about it pissing in the car.
Dude, look. You can see the giant piss stain on his pants.
Oh my god.
Oh my lord. The guy, and also, you know, I'm busting out laughing at this because, you know, you can understand why this guy is terrified, but at the same time, he's not going to be beat up. We've seen them go to prisoner of war camps. They get treated quite well. So this guy is just scared to death to the point he pissed himself and pissed all over the seats in the car. So I gotta admit, that's pretty funny right there. I haven't seen anything like that before. And pretty odd to see. Now, I would understand if a Ukrainian soldier pissed his pants if he was captured by a Russian, because we know that their treatment of Ukrainian prisoners is incredibly poor. But for the Russians, they practically may as well be getting an upgrade in their quality of life. So why in the world is that guy pissing his pants? It makes no sense. But moving on from the news in Bakhmut and the guy pissing his pants, we're now going to be moving on down into the area of Pervomaiske, which is kind of, well, actually, sorry, correction. We're going to be moving on down into the area of Marinka, where we got to see a Strela anti-air system engaging some targets in the area. The Strela uses a Strela anti-air missile. It has a launcher mounted with 4 of these anti-aircraft missiles, and then it also carries, I believe, an additional 8 missiles inside of the MTLB. It's a fairly decent surface-to-air missile system for what it is, although it is starting to become more and more obsolete in the modern day. We did see, however, that it was able to shoot down a Russian drone, as in this clip right here. We can see the missile spooling up. We can see it firing. And there it goes, right up to the drone, hitting it and taking it on out. And so with that, That's the end of that clip right there, but absolutely wonderful to see that the Ukrainians were able to knock out another Russian drone with a somewhat older surface-to-air missile system. Of course, the frontline news in the area of Donetsk has also been largely uneventful as well. We've not really seen a lot happening over here in the past 24 hours or so, especially in the area around Marinka, Prvomaiske, and so on. It does appear that Russian forces in these areas have not really been doing much or making a lot of progress, although they are conducting minor offensives in that area as well. Moving on from that area and down into the area of Novomayorsk, and we just put this marker down kind of in the general area of Novomayorsk, kind of towards Novopetrokivka, but we saw today that a Russian machine gun post that had been set up far behind the lines, probably in preparation for a Russian retreat here in the future, apparently was hit today by a Ukrainian FPV drone, knocking it on out. For some reason, Reddit can't be reached at the moment, so we're going to be trying that again here in a minute. And so let's see if it works this time.
Ring, ring, ring. Ring, ring, ring. Hello, this is Reddit. Oh, look, it picked up.
Oh, look, hey, look at that. Dude,
oh, hello?
It looks like they changed the interface, too, in the meantime. Like, right in the middle of us running the show, the interface just changed. So apparently that was the reason why. But we did get to see the FPV drone slam on down to his target right here. I can see the rain. I don't know. That sounded like that song. But anyways, we can see the drone flying on in. And we can see the Russian Z out here. Here's the machine gun post. Oh, a hole in one. Call this drone operator Tiger Woods, because that was right into the hole. I have a feeling that this drone operator isn't missing a tooth, though. But still, great to see that it was able to hit that Russian machine gun post and knock it on out. Of course, absolutely wonderful to see Ukrainian drone pilots using the wonders of modern technology to bring the war right to the Russians and right to their faces. With that, that's the end of that clip right there. Of course, very nice to see. And with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip and on into the area of Avdiivka, where we also got to see some Russian forces getting hit by another FPV drone in this area.
Ring, ring, ring. Ring, ring, ring.
Hello?
Hello, Reddit.
Hello there.
Man, Reddit and YouTube decided to fix their interfaces on the same day. What were the odds?
Everyone went, hey guys, y'all know what'd be good? Let's start changing everything today. It's like, no, don't do that. It's like we gotten used to everything finally. All right, we got a silent motion picture here. We're watching a Laurel and Hardy film.
And, gee, we can see the drone coming on in right to the Russians. Oi, look at that. Wow. Got him right dead on the nail. And we can see another FPV drone coming on in. The Russians, of course, trying to harass the drone by firing at it, but the drone is going to harass them instead. Oh, tribulations. Look at that. Call it jackpot, because this drone is going right in for the hit.
This is literally like a silent motion. Oh, well, they went back to full color, and we got to see it in 4K Ultra HD, nonetheless. We can now see the next drone flying on in.
Oh, this is that intermission card.
yeah. This is when everyone goes on a snack break at the movie theater in the 30s. But we can see the drone flying straight on into the bunker. And hitting it as well. And we can now see the next drone flying on into another bunker on the trench complex. We can see a couple of Russians right there. And I think they're about to find out what the drones can do. Right there, see? The drones do a lot. It comes in with a big bang. Now, you know, Matthew, there's always been a little bit of an argument, Matthew, about the how in the world the universe started. You know, the Big Bang, other things, you know. But I think the Ukrainians are convincing the Russians each and every day that they will end in a specific way with a Big Bang. So apparently that's the ending, not the beginning, according to the Ukrainians, or more so.
I want to tell you,
are.
it's very funny. I was about to make that exact same joke, and then you made it, and I was like, no way. He just made the exact same joke that I was thinking about.
We're NPCs, but now, Matthew, we've all read off of a script. But we can say, oh, third time's the charm. Oh, actually, that's the fourth time.
This is a real hellish-looking landscape, by the way. Just I know it's through a black and white camera here, but still, it's pretty hideous looking.
It is pretty tough, I'm not going to lie. And also, Nicholas Condor said, where in the world is my piano company? It doesn't have that. It has that instead. I can't play that much of it, but, you know, that's what it has in the background. Just putting that out there. It does have vaudeville music. But that's largely the end of the clip. Of course, the Ukrainians were very happy with their successful strikes on Russian forces in that area today, and hopefully we'll see that these strikes continue to whittle down the Russian forces for the counteroffensives that will be coming up again in the winter. Moving on from that clip and into our next one towards the area of Huilopol, we also got to see a large column of NRAPs in the southern front area preparing to receive their marching orders and move on to the front line. We can see them all lined up right here. I gotta say,
That's what I like to see. I love to see it because the MRAP is a very capable vehicle. That looks like the newer MRAP too, like the more like off-road capable looking ones, and not the tin or like metal box MRAP.
yeah, and also, wait a minute, hang on, there's more of them. We can see what appears to be wolfhounds, British Mastiffs, I believe, near the rear. And then way back there, we can see what seems to be possibly a tank or two. Oh, no, it's an AMX-10. Oh, dude, we haven't seen an AMX-10 in a little bit. But really nice little lineup here. Really nice collection of vehicles. And Matthew, I know the MRAP that you're talking about here at the start, the modern-looking ones that kind of are set up like a pickup truck with that area that you can sit in the back. But I still can't think about what the name of that one in particular is. It's an Oshkosh.
I think this is
something.
the Oshkosh. Yes, the Oshkosh MRAP. The ones the Marines got.
They're good. I mean, they look good. They're very sleek. Of course, well and truly crew protected. There's no doubt about that. Don't really know about the guys who would be riding in the back, though. I don't know if they would be protected too well. I have a feeling it's probably not. But still, very nice to see the Ukrainians using a large amount of modern Western equipment in the southern front as well, and getting ready to move on into the front lines, and hopefully use that equipment against the Russians themselves. Moving on from that and into the area of Rabotne, we've also seen that over the past 24 hours in this area, absolutely nothing has happened. In fact, this front line has stopped moving for so long that Deep State UA is now coloring it green, which means that this is confirmed held territory for several weeks at this point. We haven't seen any major advances beyond that. We have a feeling that the Ukrainian offensive in this area has stalled due to poor weather, due to the Rasputitsa now being in season, and because of that, we'll probably wait and see that Ukrainian offensives in this area will begin to start once more as the winter comes around, sometimes around late November, early December, once the ground begins to freeze and it becomes solid enough for armor action to continue. But moving on from the frontline analysis in that area, we did get to see that a Ukrainian soldier who was moving around on the front lines today was very lucky as he was missed narrowly by an incoming FPV drone. And so, here's the clip. We're going to be muting that, but we can see the Ukrainian soldier walking through the trench, looking around, and speeding up a little bit. And we hear that he's probably hearing the FPV drone right now. And that's the end of the clip. But still, very nice to know that he was luckily dodged by the FPV drone, and he was able to make it on out of there. Moving on from that and towards the village of Tavria, we also got to see a Russian tank getting destroyed by a deep drone strike in this area. And this video was also brought to us by United 24, which made a specific mention of showing this tank being taken out in the Tavria direction, or more so near the area of the Zaporizhia front line. And so, here is the clip, and hopefully this music isn't licensed or anything, because for some reason we did get a content ID on one of the songs that played last night, although usually United 24 nowadays seems to have a license for their music, so we get to play it, but sometimes that's not the case. Nevertheless, we always take a risk with them because it's United 24, why not? But here's the clip. Man, they be bussin'. Are we knocking out Russians or are we knocking out beats here? What the hell's going on?
Bug life.
Man, more like the Stugna life.
They have a little bit of moaning going on in the background.
Man, whenever the Ukrainians see their drone bomblet hit right on target, oh,
Oh,
I can't unhear that now.
oh.
It just keeps going and they're not stopping. It's like a repeating loop in the background.
It's flashing up there at the very top, not for public display, and here it is in the public display.
Yeah. Many thanks to all drone operators. Well, we're going to end the clip right there because the rest of it is just watching that one tank burn. But still, pretty interesting to see that they were able to destroy a large amount of Russian forces in the area and have an interesting beat to accompany it. I gotta say, fly beats, fly beats. Moving on from that, we're now going to be moving out of the area of the southern front, because that was the last clip we had from there, and we're now going to be moving on into the area of the Kherson front, specifically the area that the Ukrainians have been able to secure a foothold in on the southern bank of the Dnipro River. We got to see a Russian soldier was captured here today as well, and they talked to him a little bit.
Привет, большой и пламенный, Карам, Псих и Чача.
Красавчик. От кого, скажи?
От Сухаревского Виктора, который, блядь, долбоеб сюда приехал.
А с какого ты подразделения?
Второй батальон мотострелковый.
Какой? Какой страны?
Раша.
Раша? Все, понятно.
Very interesting to see, and I gotta say that this guy is pretty suited up. If there's such a thing as drip, this is not it. I don't know what the hell he's even wearing. It's like some giant like life preserver you get off the Titanic. Also, what the hell's under his jacket? I mean, this guy looks like he's thin, but his jacket coats look like Popeye's, the sailor's arms are inside of these things. I mean, there's some...
It's some thick jacket or something, and he's like wearing like a car seat cushion with the armrest over his shoulders.
Yeah, and then he's also got on a boonie hat or Gordon the Fisherman's hat, and then he's got a hoodie on over that. Like, this guy is the opposite of dripped. He's ice. Like, this is the worst. But anyways, moving on from that, still very interesting prisoner taken in the area, but I don't really know what to make of his clothing styles. He made terrible choices in this life. We can say that at the minimum. Moving on from that, however, and on up into our location unknowns, we do also have some interesting bits of videos in our location unknowns. Starting off with a picture, actually, although I told you all it'd be videos, of a Ukrainian soldier holding two Snipex alligators. You never get a true scale of how big these rifles are until you see them stood upright with the silencer attached or the suppressor. These things are huge. I mean, they're massive. And of course, they're 14.5 millimeter, 14.5 millimeter rifles. That's about as big as you get before you start to get into a almost like an anti-tank rifle or an anti-aircraft gun. This thing is just huge, and it's insane to see these things in the raw size of them. Also, the scopes don't look like they're joking either. That scope's got to be like high-powered enough that you can see the rings of Saturn if you look up into the space. But moving on from that,
wouldn't it be a bit of like a design flaw for it to be this large? Because the part of the goal of a sniper is being portable to an extent, and these are probably not considered portable. And also, do you really need a round that large to take out infantry?
Well, I mean, it's not necessarily about taking out infantry. It's more so about taking out materials. These rifles are actually have enough armor penetration, much like the M82 Barrett 50 cal, to be able to punch through light armor of armored personnel carriers, SPGs, machine gun pillboxes, even punch through the sandbags that are at machine gun pillboxes. Things like that are incredibly important in making sure to whittle down Russian forces as much as you can. And also, if you hit a guy with this thing, it's a pretty well and good certainty that he won't be around much longer. So And also, another thing I forgot to mention is that larger calibers equal larger ranges and much better performance at longer ranges. The heavier the bullet is, the less it'll be affected by wind, humidity, and everything else that is a sniper's worst nightmare. So as far as snipers go, the larger the caliber or the more velocity behind the round, the better for accuracy reasons. And so that's probably why they're giving out these Snipex alligators, is for all of those reasons combined. There's a lot of benefits in using a large caliber rifle like this, but at the same time, there's also drawbacks as well, and that's still why the Ukrainians have other snipers that are using things like the Barrett MRAD or Remington 700s that have been really souped up. But moving on from that interesting bit of location unknown news and into the next one, we also got to see a Ukrainian soldier ducking just in time for an incoming Russian artillery barrage. And we're going to be muting that, but we can see the soldier here duck, and then the shell hits literally right behind his trench. A very lucky duck right there. And we can see him grabbing the camera to immediately show off the damage. And just amazing to see the kind of luck this guy had. He ducked literally seconds before it would have been too late. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little location unknown clip and on into our next one, where we also got to see something rare. A Humvee mounted tow hitting a Russian tank. Let me show y'all a Humvee tow. Images. This is what a Humvee-mounted tow launcher looks like. It is a Humvee with a BGM-71 tow-guided missile launcher attached to the top of it. These were actually provided in 2018 by the US government in, I believe, the hundreds to the Ukrainian army to provide them with some kind of anti-tank guided missile systems that would be able to go up against Russian armor in the future. And it does appear that they're finally beginning to use these on video, where we get to see them actually knocking out a Russian tank. Here's the clip. I'm going to be muting that because it sounds like there's Carnival Chad music playing in the background. But we can see the tow lined up on the Russian tank, firing the tow. We can see it flying right out of view, right up there. Check that out, Matthew. Look. And there it goes. That was incredibly cool. And
they got the laptop open looking at it too.
Man, they got out the damn Asus gaming PC, and look at that. Winner, chicken dinner. They hit the tank and took it on out. Great to see the tow still standing up in the modern day, considering that it's getting to be a little bit of an older ATGM system by modern standards. It is still able to punch up to the best Russian main battle tanks and knock them on out. And not only that, it's being carried on an American legend. Like the Jeep, it is the Humvee. The Humvee is, of course, an American legend as far as the military car world goes, or utility vehicle goes. The Jeep was the one that came before it, and then there was the M151 Mutt, and then after that, we got the Humvee. A very impressive vehicle with a very long and storied legacy, of course now being replaced by the MRAP, which is now going to be the next level of the U.S. military utility vehicle. But moving on from that, a really cool clip to see, and that largely is all of the clips that we have inside of Ukraine. But nevertheless, there's been a lot going on in that area over just the past 24 hours, and a lot of y'all have been talking about those events. And Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first poll and question segment, our first poll says, Israel says it has set a date for the Gaza ground invasion to start, and Netanyahu calls for unity. And what are your thoughts? 63% said Israel will be successful in Gaza, 21% said, this could backfire on Israel, 12% said unsure, and 4% said Israel will fail to take Gaza. And if y'all did not hear already today, Netanyahu came out and made a very ominous speech ahead of the invasion of Gaza and said that a date had been set and they are committed to going forward with the invasion. So at this point, it is almost a guarantee that it's going to happen most likely within the next week, if not sooner than that. So we have confirmation of that. And also, apparently the calls from the U.S. for them to hold off the invasion for whatever reason aren't going over too well because they've already committed. So to me, I think Israel will be successful in Gaza. Israel is overpowered tremendously compared to the combatants inside of Gaza, and I think it's pretty much a done deal. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that we're probably seeing that the Israelis will most likely be successful in their ground offensive in Gaza, although do not make any mistake, this ground offensive is going to be an incredibly difficult one. They are going to be moving into a city with a population of 2 million people. Gaza is not a small city whatsoever, and it's going to eclipse the Battle of Bakhmut as as difficult as the battle is, and also considering that no civilians, or an incredibly small amount of them, will be able to leave the area before the offensive begins because Hamas is forcing them to remain there, that is going to be adding another layer of difficulty that the Israeli Defense Forces are going to have to, of course, work around. That is going to make it also a massive challenge. Going off of that, however, and knowing that Israel has a lot of experience with asymmetrical warfare over the past 40 years or so, I would say that they're probably going to do quite well. They are the ones who have the doctrinal experience to be able to do something like this successfully, and considering that their supply lines will not be long, at the longest, their supply lines are going to be just a few miles long from the Gaza border and into the Gaza Strip, there's no way that they can logistically fail at this war. The only way that they can fail at this war and the invasion of Gaza will be due to a lack of foresight on the military commanders' end and a failing of their battle doctrines and tactics. That's really the only way that they can fail, and knowing how they operate in these kinds of asymmetrical wars and asymmetrical fights, they usually do exceptionally well, even compared to other conventional militaries like the US military, which has proven several times to have a bit of a difficult challenge trying to go from a conventional fighting doctrine to an asymmetrical fighting doctrine. Of course, the United States is kind of the pioneer of that doctrine outside of Israel, but at the same time, while being a pioneer of it outside of Israel, it appears that major Western countries, like the United States, doctrinally just don't have the ideas, the experience, or the ability to really handle that kind of an asymmetrical war well. Of course, we still do our best, and we do better than really everyone else out there outside of Israel, but I have a feeling that the Israelis are well suited to the task at hand as far as the invasion of Gaza goes. But with that, hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says American troop casualties have risen to 30 in the Middle East from 22 yesterday. And in your opinion, is the number underreported? 49% said yes, we are not getting the real numbers. 23% said no, it is most likely accurate. 18% said unsure, and 11% said, I have my doubts on it. And I would be very amiss to say that I don't have my doubts about those numbers, because we have had more attacks occur today on American bases in the Middle East, but nothing like we saw the other day. And I have a feeling that some of these numbers were probably underreported from the other day, and I wouldn't be surprised if that number is much higher, to be perfectly honest. The United States is much better than Russia when it comes to its propaganda and things like that, because every country has propaganda to an extent. And in this instance, I wouldn't be surprised if the number was being messed with a little bit. But Enforcer, what say you?
I actually am completely certain that the number is being underreported at the moment, considering that it took nearly a week after, well, not really a week, but 4 days after U.S. bases in Syria and Iraq were attacked for us to actually get any reports at all about what happened at those bases and casualties, which for the first 4 days were completely denied. The Department of Defense said that the bases were hit. There was no casualties whatsoever, no injuries. In fact, it may as well have not even hit as far as they were concerned. That shows to me that the Department of Defense is trying to make sure that the information moves around the central government, the federal government of the United States, such as the Office of the President and the Pentagon, before any official statements are made about casualties and losses. And also considering that this isn't anything like 9/11 or Pearl Harbor, where you can't really try and fib what's happening. It just is what it is, and it gets out immediately. In the Middle East, there is a little bit of time, because of its isolation from the rest of the United States and the news circuit, for the Department of Defense to be able to talk about what they are going to put out and what they think will not rile up the public too much. So going off of that, I would be fairly confident that the casualty report is actually underreported at the moment, and we'll also be going into here in a minute, once we shift over into our Middle East news segment, some very concerning reports that we've heard of serious injuries now being found in some of those U.S. service members that were injured several days ago in the attacks at Antanf and Al-Assad, as well as the Victory Air Base, or the Victory Camp at the Iraqi International Airport in Baghdad. And so with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our last poll says Russia conducted a massive nuclear test today, and it launched a Yars ICBM missile. And what do you believe is the goal? 64% said Russia is just trying to create more chaos. 24% said Russia is actually preparing for a real war. 7% said it's probably just a routine test, and 5% said unsure. And today, they actually launched a Yars missile. So they do have at least one working ICBM. We do know that for a fact now. And there's actually a video of it being launched online. It was launched from the Cosmodrome Also, there was a Sineva ballistic missile that was launched from a nuclear submarine as well. So they were actually launching real missiles today, which is definitely a step up from what they've been doing. And it's not good to see, I must say. And Enforcer, what would you say?
I would say it's not great to see. This is also coming off of the back of reports that the U.S. Military has also conducted nuclear tests as well about a week and a half ago to 2 weeks ago inside of, I believe it was Nevada, if I'm correct, Matthew?
Yeah, but those weren't actual missile launches. They were just underground nuclear testing.
Nevertheless, all of these tests are just starting to happen over the past few weeks from Russia and the United States. And I consider it very serious and very concerning that nuclear treaties are now being thrown into the wind and nuclear testing is beginning again. This is something that I believe needs to be curtailed immediately, and while the Russians and the United States are pitted against each other ideologically and once again militarily at this point, I think it's very important to get a diplomatic dialogue on that particular instance and reaffirm treaties that ban nuclear testing and also begin to work towards nuclear disarmament again. Nuclear weapons are a grave danger to the world and, of course, also a massive concern for really everyone involved. Nuclear weapons, and a lot of people nowadays say, oh, nuclear weapons aren't as bad as they're made out to be. No, not really, because a lot of people when you're growing up just tell you that nuclear weapons will destroy the world, which is not true. I mean, they're going to destroy a lot of the civilized world, but it's not going to, just literally turn the world into shards of chunks of rock in the middle of space. It's not going to do that. But one thing it will do is end up killing nearly 2/3 of everyone in the northern hemisphere if a nuclear exchange begins. And that is something that is incredibly concerning. And I think it would be beneficial and important to try and at least have some kind of diplomatic negotiations on getting nuclear tests removed from the picture again, and also nuclear rearmament removed as well. But that's just my take on it, because hearing that the Russians are now launching nuclear missiles and testing them today, that is incredibly concerning. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, not to mention the possibility for a misidentification with that test missile being launched and us not knowing if it's actually real or not. Because didn't Russia say that they weren't going to notify the U.S. 24 hours ahead of time, or are they still adhering to that?
I'm not really sure if they are or are not. I do know about the missiles being launched, but I don't know if they were giving us any heads up. I have a feeling that they probably were, because even North Korea, with as rogue of a state it usually does give a heads up warning whenever it's testing a nuclear bomb. Not so much, however, whenever they're testing just a ballistic missile. They'll shoot that thing right over Japan and not even tell anyone. But if it's a nuclear weapon, usually they even give a little bit of a notice most of the time, from what I understand. But with that, I hope that does answer your question fairly well, Matthew, at least from the knowledge I know right now. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and we are fresh out of poll questions, so we are moving on into our super chat questions. And to change the tone a little bit from talking about nukes and the destruction of the Earth, we're going to go over to Duncan VR, who has the animal noises of the stream, and he puts in a $38 donation. And he says, Bamuba, Gajlik Veliken, Baba Moo, 1800, no respect. Oh my. I got my boat filled with supplies, Baba, ramen noodles, and long-lasting food. Now, quack. And if something goes down, I head up the river, Baba, and don't look back. Oh, man, I'm telling you, Baba, Baba.
Oh, man, I'm telling you. And Geschlik Veliken. And thank you so much once again for the support, Duncan VR, and also being a prepper. It appears that prepping is probably going to become a very big hobby for a lot of people here soon. Honestly, I'm still not going to be a prepper. Because, if things happen, I have a feeling I'm probably going to be screwed even if I was a prepper. So just no point in me doing it. Maybe Matthew will do it, though. But still.
I will.
Hey, he will. That's it. Hey, this guy gets it. But still, thank you so much once again for support, Duncan VR, and throwing in the traditional animal noises. Because if it wasn't for folks like you who supported this channel and helped us keep this thing running, it wouldn't be possible for us to keep this stream on air. And so thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much once again for being a longtime member of the Lee Spring Army and helping us to keep this thing rolling. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat goes to Susan Lowell, another longtime channel legend, just like Duncan. And thank you very much, Susan, for that $31 support. Hey! And Susan says, in honor of hero and LSA legend CME for PC.
And thank you so much for the support, Susan. And also, thank you for giving a tribute to CME for PC. Of course, as many of y'all know, CME passed away yesterday, which was incredibly unfortunate to hear. And sad to know because CME has been around forever on this channel and has been here since the channel existed on since the channel blew up on day 4. We had gotten to know him incredibly well in the live chat, and it's unfortunate to know that he did pass away. We'll also be, making sure to remember him, as his memory will live on in the Lee Spring Army. Many of y'all got to know him and were great friends with him, and he was an incredibly nice person, through and through. And I bet many of y'all will make sure to keep the memory of CME 4PC alive through the Lee Spring Army itself. And so, with that, thank you for reminding us all of the passing of CME 4PC. Once again, he is gone, but will never be forgotten in the Lee Spring Army, being an old guard. And thank you so much once again for saying that he is a hero of the Lee Spring Army. He was also a dual citizen in NAFO as well. And did a lot of work to support Ukraine through NAFO, which is also absolutely amazing to know. And so with that, thank you so much once again, Susan, for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And rest in peace to CME 4PC once again. And moving on to our next super chat, we have a $20 super chat from Panama Floyd, another channel legend. And thank you very much, Panama, very much for that support as well. And he says, quote unquote, if you want to run, if you want to live, run. Panama, I joke with the Enforcer every time the stream starts when we're like in the countdown about that exact thing that Zelenskyy says during the intro card. I don't know what it is about it, but something is like very funny about that. It's just the way he said it, I think. You can't understand, or I can't understand Ukrainian, but you know exactly what he's saying when he says it. But Enforcer, what say you?
Man, every time he starts off, I'm always joking with Matthew. I'm always saying, like, we are actually saying it to each other, like kidding about it at the same time. If you want to live, run, bitch. Like we say something like that. But we get a huge kick out of that every time we listen to it. And also it's pretty cool sounding too with the video added to it. And so thank you so much once again for the support, Panama, and helping the channel to keep on running. And also throwing that in because I'm glad to know that other people find that to be a memorable line and a memorable quote. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Panama Floyd, and helping the channel to keep on running. I hope we were able to address that well. And I got to thank everyone who goes out of their way to support this channel as well, because y'all support helps to make this channel possible. We have completely demonetized this channel for the most part. We don't run ads, we don't run sponsors, and it's been that way the entire existence of this channel. The only way that we're able to support ourselves and do this as a job is through the viewers' direct support, and whether y'all decide that this channel is worthwhile to support or not. And I've got to thank every single one of y'all for y'all's support, and everyone who will support, because y'all help to keep this channel alive and help to keep rolling. And if it wasn't for y'all doing that, we wouldn't have been able to be on air for this long, and we wouldn't be able to continue to keep this channel on air. And so with that, I thank you all so much once again for the support, helping the channel to keep on running, and also throwing in some interesting comments and questions, and even sharing where y'all are from, because that's always very interesting to me, where in the world, literally, y'all are from. But with that, that is the end of this question segment, and we will be back right after the break to begin the next segment of the news in the Middle East.
where the doughboys dig and fight, and those caissons go rolling along. Our barrage will be there, fire down the rockets flare, while those caissons go rolling along. For it's high, high, he in the field artillery, call off the numbers loud and strong, and wherever we go, you will always know that those caissons are rolling along, that those caissons are rolling along.
And welcome back, everyone. We're going to begin our Middle Eastern news segment tonight, starting off inside the United States, as we've heard a statement today from the U.S. government that apparently the United States is going to be sending all of its Iron Dome systems into Israel to support their war effort. From what we understand, the United States currently has 2 Iron Dome batteries inside of its stockpile, along with 300 interceptors, and these will all be sent to Israel here within the next few days to once again bolster their air defense systems in this upcoming conflict. We've also seen that the United States has put out a very interesting and quite concerning report as well, that the U.S. munition stockpiles have been severely depleted, and at current production levels, these will not be restored for several years at this point. And this is something that is becoming quite important, considering that it appears that a new conflict is looming inside the Middle East. U.S. munitions productions and munition storepiles are something very important to look at. This was retweeted by a friend of the Lee Spring Army, Trent Talenko, today, and according to this chart right here, we can see a large number of some weapon systems, not all of them, and their ammunitions have been severely depleted due to the amount of transfers to Ukraine and the level of production on an annual basis. We can see that over this chart, it covers the number of number of ammunition pieces transferred to Ukraine versus their production rate on an annual basis. We can also see that the manufacturing lead time is incredibly long, usually 1 to 2 years long in every single category, and it takes quite a long while to produce this amount of equipment. And also, according to that, it takes an incredibly long time to rebuild these stockpiles. Based off of all of this information, we can see a very concerning picture growing out of this chart. It appears that most ammunitions that we've sent to Ukraine would most likely, at the current rate of production, take several years, if not 5 years, to rebuild. Some, however, are in fairly good shape. From what we can tell, the production rate of the HIMARS is quite low, and also the amount that we've sent has also been considerably low as well. One thing, however, that I do have to say is that this chart is actually quite accurate. I know that many people have heard me continuously say, as far as the war in Ukraine is concerned, that the delivery of American munitions to Ukraine is of no concern whatsoever to the United States, and we should continue to send them ammunition and equipment. And that is something that I'm entirely behind still. But considering that the United States is clearly going to be moving into a conflict inside the Middle East, and we are going to be desperately needing large amounts of munitions, I believe that at this point it is going to be very important and prudent for the United States to declare the Defense Production Act in effect and to begin to produce large and excessively high amounts of munitions of every single category that we see right here. Of course, the amount of production will have to increase drastically to make sure that the U.S. armed forces in the Middle East can continue to keep up their rate of fire, and to also make sure that the forces in Ukraine can also be provided with their amount of equipment as well, to make sure that we're not losing on either front. Because of this, and due to the rate of production and the number of transfers that we've seen to Ukraine, most of these categories will have to have their production increased by nearly fivefold, or even fourfold in some, to make sure to make up for the amount of ammunition that we have sent to Ukraine. The amount of ammunition productions are, of course, at a pre-war level, and the United States will have to mobilize their defense industry, as well as the civilian and commercial industries, to be able to make up for this loss. Well, this is something that has historically been seen many times over history. In the First and Second World Wars, the United States had to rapidly change from a commercial economy to a war economy, which is just a necessary ebb and flow. However, I believe that this change should come before the war instead of when the war finally happens. When the war finally happens, we are going to find ourselves up the creek without a paddle, especially with the given amount of ammunition and the amount that we've transferred over to Ukraine. The United States military not only is a incredibly large military, but it's an also well-equipped military, and one that requires a massive amount of munitions and equipment to keep its armed forces running. And so based off of that, we may even see that the amount of ammunition production in every category will not just have to increase fivefold, but most likely 7 or 10-fold to make sure to account for the ammunition usage of the U.S. military engaged in a full-on war, as well as the Ukrainians who are also engaged on a full-scale war. Not only that, but I see JB throw up another interesting comment. This also does create jobs, and this is something that the American public is actually doing quite well with. From what we understand at the moment, the unemployment rate is somewhere around 5.7 to 6%, which is actually within acceptable levels. However, there are some well-paying jobs that can be had in the defense industry, of course, a silver lining of a war effort. And not only that, this will be putting more economic stimulation into the American economy, which will be helping us out in the long run. The United States did come out of the Second World War, the deadliest and most devastating war in the world, as an economic powerhouse due to the overproduction of equipment that we had during that time. And so while it is also a necessity to up our war production and prepare for what's coming around the corner, it is also going to be a massive benefit to the U.S. economically and the people inside the United States, as many of them will be able to find more well-paying and more productive jobs through this increase of demand for munitions. Moving on from that concerning news, I'd really also like to hand it over before we move on to Matthew really quickly, because I know that Matthew probably has some comments of his own on this munitions chart, because this is something that we've actually talked about a bit behind the scenes, and now, considering that we're moving into what may be a conventional war and a very large one in the Middle East, this is now a pressing issue. So Matthew, do you have anything to say on it?
I would say it's very important to prioritize the needs of our allies at the same time and keep sending stuff overseas, because there's an argument that goes around, and we're not going to get into politics on it, but there's an argument that goes around that we should only prioritize the U.S. interests over everyone else's interest. And that is simply a bad argument, because if our allies start faltering and they can't defend themselves, that creates a problem that the United States, which is essentially the policeman of the world, have to then come in and try to clean up the mess. So by sending stuff overseas, we are helping out the allies and preventing a problem in the future. It's like investing in insurance to prevent a war from breaking out in the future. And while we're on the topic, real quick, we did put a poll up on it, and the question is, do you believe the U.S. is recklessly sending out too much of our own weapons stockpile? 61% said no, allies are just as important, 29% said yes, we need to conserve, and 9% said unsure. And I'd have to agree with the 61%. Like I said, we have to make sure our allies are taken care of as well. Also, we do have the means, like the enforcer mentioned, to ramp up our production to make sure we are meeting our own quotas as well on how many weapons and ammunition that we have in our stockpile. So I think we can balance both at the same time. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that we certainly need to ensure that we balance both at the same time. The United States did not win the Second World War alone. We won it with the support of the United Kingdom, Free France, and the Soviet Union. The United States was the largest arms provider out of all of these allies to every single other one. And throughout the course of the Second World War, the United States never received a large amount of arms, weapons, or equipment from any of the other allied nations in the conflict, but at the same time, not only did we provide our armed forces with the most up-to-date and advanced equipment at the time, and also the most reliable as well, the Germans can get dunked on for that, we also provided thousands, tens of thousands of tanks to the British, the Free French, as well as the Soviet Union. Not only that, we also ensured that their logistical arms were incredibly effective and well organized on top of that. And considering all of this, I believe in the mindset of the Lee Spring Army as far as the logistical concerns of the United States are at risk as well. Why not have the cake and eat it? There's no such thing as having to pull back to take care of ourselves alone. That's never the way the United States has operated, and honestly, I feel it's un-American because it's kind of shooting the abilities of the United States a little low. I believe that we can go and produce enough ammunition for the United States Armed Forces to use, and not only that, we can also provide enough ammunition and arms to provide all of our allies with as well at the exact same time. And not only that, we will also be able to make sure that there is, once again, a decent amount of well-paying jobs in the United States in these arms industries. And not only that, they'll provide a well-needed economic stimulus and make sure to throw our economy probably into the next golden age. Of course, it's a little bit of a weird way to say something like that. You know, of course, we're producing arms and equipment that will be used overseas to wipe out our enemies, the best way to put it. But at the same time, there's always a little bit of a silver lining to everything, and that certainly is a massive silver lining, is that the economy will probably get a massive spur from this huge increase in military spending and the amount of money that's going to be paid out to the folks working in these munitions factories.
And also, another positive thing as well is right now a good portion of our defense jobs in the country, to my understanding, are based more around development and R&D around these weapon systems. And that these jobs that would be created by, you know, not necessarily low-skilled workers, but more entry-level workers that would be making these munitions and helping to manufacture them. Those jobs are more readily accessible to pretty much everyone instead of just people with high levels of skill and education. So that's also another good positive aspect to it as well.
And it is a huge aspect as well. And also, munitions factory work, for the most part, at least on the factory floor, doesn't necessarily require a high amount of training. It's mostly on-the-job training, which, you know, it's a lower form of training, so the entry level for folks to get into the munitions industry is a lot lower, at least for the factory floor production side of things, than it would be for any other kind of weapons work, for example, weapons development, which takes a lot of expertise and knowledge to be able to do. But still, I think that this chart is something of a concern, of course, you know, with everything being in the red and knowing that we may be going into a war soon, it's a little bit concerning. But also at the exact same time, this is something that I believe is going to be a massive benefit in disguise to the United States. And I think that we'll be able to create lemonade out of lemons in this case. But moving on from the munitions charts that we saw today, and also I'd like to make a quick mention that this munitions chart isn't showing everything. It's not showing 120 millimeter rounds for the M1 Abrams. It's also not showing the 5.56 ammunition stores around the United States for our small arms. It's not showing anything like that. It's showing particular weapon systems, specifically 155 millimeter ammunition, Javelin ammunition, HIMARS ammunition, GMLRS ammunition, which is also used in the HIMARS, and also Stinger munitions. So it's not everything. This is actually quite a small pooling that we see here, but still, it's probably reflective of the entirety of ammunition stores throughout the United States. But moving on from the news within the United States today, we have heard concerning things about U.S. forces abroad once more, as an American base was attacked in the northern area of Syria, and I believe that we actually have the name in this post of this base right here. It's near the Abu Hajar airport in northeastern Syria, and according to reports, it had come under attack several hours ago. From what we can tell, the Abu Hajar airport is somewhere in the northern area of Syria, and I'm trying to find it again, because it is very hard to spot it. It's like spotting a needle in the haystack, because the airstrip largely blends in with the surrounding. So let me just type in Abu Hajar here, and it is right here. And we can see that apparently there's an Instagram profile attached to that. So we're going to get rid of that. We're going to zoom out, and I'll show you all the exact location of this area of Syria. It's almost up into the area of, well, actually it is in the area of what would be semi-officially the cultural area of the Kurds in southern Turkey, northern Syria, and also northern Iraq as well. From what we were told, this base was immediately attacked today by some kind of a rocket barrage, and then a terrorist group came out and claimed that they were backed by Iran and that they were the terrorist groups that had conducted the attack. attacks. Once again, adding more validity to the idea that the Iranians, through proxy of all of their terrorist groups in the Middle East, are directly attacking U.S. bases and installations in the area. This was met, unfortunately, by strong finger-wagging once more, although we also had a strong bit of finger-wagging the other day. The United States once again made a statement that if attacks like that continue on American bases again, we will get involved. We have heard similar statements like that yesterday, and I believe that either the United States is hesitant to act in this region for information that we do not have, or we are waiting for more forces to arrive before we actually act decisively. So that way we can have the advantage of numbers and superiority before we do act, instead of acting quickly and then getting ourselves in a bad situation off the start. But we also heard another bit of interesting news about U.S. forces in the area, and specifically the U.S. forces that have been injured in the previous attacks at Al-Assad, Al-Tanf, and other bases within Iraq and Syria. Some of these soldiers are starting to show the signs of traumatic brain injury, and this is a very concerning injury, considering that traumatic brain injuries are usually irreversible as far as their effects to soldiers, and something that can be life-changing for many of these soldiers. According to a statement put out today by Apex WW, which according to them, they were able to get it from U.S. officials, and the U.S. officials made this statement to Politico. But according to the tweet put out by Apex today, several American troops stationed in the Middle East have reported symptoms of traumatic brain injury following rocket and drone attacks launched by Iran proxies over the past week, according to U.S. officials. Once again, I have to put out that this isn't anything like a little cut or a broken arm, something that can be fixed. Traumatic brain injury is usually a permanent affliction that many of these soldiers will continue to face for the rest of their lives. For some of them, considering the severity of traumatic brain injury and the varying degrees that you can have, for some of these soldiers, this may be life-ending for them. They may be discharged from the military and may not be able to hold a steady job beyond this point, considering that traumatic brain injury can, of course, vary widely from person to person and can also affect your abilities to just conduct basic functions. Considering this, this is showing that the attacks inside of Syria and Iraq are directly launched by Iran, by groups backed by Iran, and are causing injury and suffering of U.S. soldiers in the area. As far as I'm concerned, these are legitimate attacks by the Islamic Republic of Iran against U.S. forces in the area, and I believe that this requires a direct and immediate response to the situation in the force of, as far as the force of arms is concerned by the United States, while I stutter my way through that statement. Meanwhile, we've also heard that the panic of U.S. forces in the area, who are currently sheltering and trying to avoid these incoming attacks, are currently also having to start to batten down the hatches. We are seeing that inside of the city of Kuwait, in the nation of Kuwait, that the U.S. Embassy has put out a security alert that is being spread across the entirety of the U.S. forces inside of Kuwait and all travelers who are also from the United States who are currently in Kuwait at the moment. According to the U.S. Embassy of Kuwait's official Twitter page, the embassy is aware of threats made on social media by Alawiyat al-Wad al-Haq, a military group in Iraq, against U.S. military bases in Kuwait. As a result, the U.S. Embassy in Kuwait is limiting its activity on U.S. military bases to essential and official events only. U.S. citizens are advised to remain alert. And they also recommend to move to the travelstate.gov website to find out more information for U.S. travelers that may be visiting Kuwait here in the near future. This is something that is once again showing that the situation is getting incredibly severe in the region, and also considering that the U.S. Embassy is starting to limit U.S. military activities to basic necessities on U.S. military bases. It's also furthering the idea that the entirety of U.S. forces in the Middle East, through every single country there, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates, are most likely being put in varying states of high alert at the moment and awaiting further Iranian attacks that may be levied against them while the U.S. is trying to secure itself into the area once more. Moving on from the U.S. news in particular and on into the state of Israel in particular, we have started to hear some very interesting statements from the Israeli government today. Many of you all know that the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, came out today and made a statement. This statement was one that almost sounded like a doomsday statement and said that Israel, along with its allies, including the United States, would stand up against the axis of evil now existing in the world, including Russia, China, and Iran, and they would make sure to stand up to these evils and invade the Gaza Strip and dismantle the Hamas government, which is currently acting on the behalf of that axis of evil, according to Benjamin Netanyahu. We did also hear in this speech that the date of the ground invasion has been set in stone. Of course, we do not hear an exact date, but Benjamin Netanyahu did make it sound as though there is an official date that this offensive will begin on. We are very certain that this is not a fib as far as the information goes. We have seen that a massive buildup of Israeli forces has been sitting on the Gaza border for quite some time at this point, and that would lead us to believe that this statement is entirely true, and the offensive is probably going under its final officiation. A final officiation, that wouldn't be the right word to say. It's probably going through its final planning phases so that way they can launch the offensive here in the near future. Moving on from that bit of news, we also heard that Netanyahu has also recognized there was a critical security failing on the Israeli government's part, which was released by Clash Report today. According to a statement made by Netanyahu, he said everyone will have to answer about the security failure in the Gaza envelope, including me, but after the war. And so it does appear
a big asterisk after the war.
Yeah, after the war.
At least he's acknowledging it. But in reality, though, do we really think that Netanyahu's going to get anything from this? Probably not, because the war's probably going to last a little while, in my opinion.
Probably will. And it's interesting to see that he did admit that there was an oversight by the entire Israeli government, including himself. But we see that he's saying that everyone will answer for that after the war. So, who knows? I'm going to be honest with y'all. Who really knows if they are actually going to have themselves held accountable for the failings of the Israeli government? I'll be honest with you. I feel like they probably won't. That's usually the current occurrings of really any government around the world throughout all of history. But still an interesting statement to say, and at least they took some of the credibility and blame for what has happened inside of Israel. Moving on from that, however, we did also hear that Israeli citizens are going to be issued guns at large. Just the general population. These aren't even going to be mobilized units of reservists. This is just Israeli citizens in general will be issued personal weapons to defend the nation. This is something that I believe is a step in the right direction, and something that is going to be very important for Israel's defense moving forward. Considering that almost really all adult age citizens in Israel do have prior military experience, we can understand that these citizens will most likely organize, if need be, into well-organized militias inside of Israel, and if Israel is invaded from an area that is unknown at the time, these well-organized militias that are lightly equipped, very similar to light infantry, will probably be able to pose a good defensive barrier until the Israeli Defense Force will be able to move into the area and respond with larger and more powerful arms. Moving on from the domestic news inside of Israel and the events of the government today, we have also seen that in southern Lebanon, Israeli airstrikes are beginning to occur more so, against Hezbollah targets that are in the area. According to this picture, this was in the town of Yaron. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but we can see the streak of an Israeli jet that flew over the city. And then this next picture here, we can see a billow of smoke rising from where an Israeli airstrike occurred. We do not know the target, and we do not know what was hit, and if it was even a successful strike. But still, very nice to see that the Israelis are taking actions against the Hezbollah, wherever they may be, and making sure to put them on the back foot almost instantly before the Israeli Defense Forces start to get involved. We also saw that the Iron Dome in this area intercepted a missile that had also been fired from Lebanon before it could hit its target. And here's the clip. Also, its target was an Israeli UAV flying in the area. We can see the security camera on this house looking into the distance as an Israeli Iron Dome missile is fired and immediately hits the Hezbollah missile that was going for the Ukrainian drone, sending it up into a little bit of a sparkler, sort of, but quite nice to see.
Are these houses, by the way?
These are houses. They almost look like bunkers of their own.
Yeah, this is this is one of these like strange neighborhoods. You really can't tell if it's a nice neighborhood or a bad neighborhood.
I'm assuming this is probably a nice neighborhood just because of how clean everything is. You know what? I'm kind of interested in this. What in the world does northern Israel even look like? So let's go here. This is probably our best bet. Let's drop in a neighborhood here and see what it looks like. It kind of reminds me of Switzerland a little bit, you know?
A little bit. It's kind of surprising the way it looks. This is in northern Israel?
This is in northern Israel.
Interesting. Yeah, it's actually pretty nice.
Yeah, it's actually quite nice. For some reason, I was expecting, it would kind of be like, I guess, the rural area of Israel, and it wouldn't look that good, but Actually, it doesn't look that. Honestly, it looks like anywhere in Europe. It kind of even looks like Germany a little bit with how a lot of their buildings were built after the war. So pretty interesting to see. Apparently, that looks like a high-end neighborhood that we were watching here on this security camera. But still, very interesting. And if we have any Israeli viewers here tonight and y'all would like to share a little bit about what life is like in Israel on a basic level like that, we'd love to hear it because I'm always interested in stuff like that, getting to know more about folks around the world. But moving on from that bit of news in northern Israel, great to see the Iron Dome successfully intercept that incoming surface-to-air missile. Moving further on down and into the Gaza Strip, we also did see down here in Gaza that there was an airstrike conducted by the Israeli Air Force once again today, which we'll see right here. And this apparently was filmed pretty quickly, but here's a clip. The quality does improve. See a large billow of black smoke coming from the central part of the city. It's a very thick black smoke, indicating that they may be hitting something that is either fuel or munitions. Usually the smoke isn't that black. If it's something like a building, usually the smoke is kind of grayish. If it's ammunition, it's solid white. And if it's some kind of a fuel, it's solid black like this.
Jeez.
The Israelis are hammering this part of the city right now. I believe that they're probably trying to target a specific tunnel network in that area, and so they're just hitting it with multiple bombs to make sure to bore down towards the tunnel and then destroy it. I think that may be what they're doing right here, but an absolutely insane video to see, just the amount of bombs that were dropped onto one part of Gaza. Meanwhile, we're going to be taking y'all back several days, because that's really the only clip we got from Gaza today of the continuing airstrikes. We're going to be taking y'all back to nearly the beginning of the incursion by Hamas and the massacre that happened afterwards. And this was in the town of Bet Arei. Many of y'all know the town of Bet Arei because it was the site of a slaughter by Hamas where nearly 10% of the town's population was killed in a mere 8 hours. We have not gotten any footage from there before, or at least a lot of it, but finally today, we got some footage from security cameras showing the Israeli Defense Forces, quick reaction forces, moving into the area and immediately engaging the Hamas terrorists while they were conducting the massacre inside of the town, and actually managing to save many citizens' lives before they would be slain by Hamas if the IDF had not intervened. This video footage is not graphic. It is a little distressing, however. If you're haven't watched the war in Ukraine, I guess it would be a little distressing. But here's the footage, and to quickly explain what's happening in this clip, this is a car being operated by Hamas terrorists. The IDF fires onto the car, the driver goes and takes a nap, they run into this wall here, and then one of the Hamas fighters climbs out and tries to run away. The IDF pursues him. We see the car out of control right there, running into a wall. I mean, you see one of the terrorists in the back and the one in the driver's side, passenger seat, hopping out and crawling away about as quickly as they can. The IDF is, of course, right on their tail. When you see the IDF soldiers running up and trying to find him, and when you see that they have apparently spotted him right there, pointing out some of them, and then moving back onto the road and moving around the car and back into the city of Bet Arei. We can now see them running along, and they're going to be taking along with them a large amount of citizens who at this point were in the middle of the crossfire in between Hamas and the IDF. We can also see one of them taking their dog, which we got to say, huge respect for taking the dog. And we can see two IDF soldiers walking along the perimeter with more citizens in tow.
Or the two people that ran around that car and crawled out of it, those were who again?
Those were the Hamas terrorists.
Were they armed?
Yes. And let's go back and watch that again. The car runs out of control, hits the rock, slams into the fence. The driver's taking a nap, by the way. It's an Israeli, it's a nap provided by the Israeli Defense Forces, if you get what I'm saying. And then when they climb out, you can see this guy here has a AKM with a folding stock, and then the other guy also had an AK as well. You can see that right there a couple of times. We can't tell what exact kind it is, probably an AKM. But they both go crawling off. And then the IDF runs up not long after lighting up the car again, by the way. You can see the smoke coming off of it.
They were kind of brave just running up on them like that with AKs in their hands.
Man, the IDF don't give no damn. They'll take you on point-blank range. They'll run you down. I mean, the IDF really does have just nerves of steel and also operated with some very quick wit. Like these guys here that organized an evacuation of these citizens and apparently did it with such a calm nature that while, of course, it's an emergency and everyone knows that, people are still going to take their dogs with them, instead of just leaving them behind. So I gotta say, they organized this quite well and did it very calmly. Also, I have to say that those Tavors are looking very nice. Very good looking rifle. And great to see.
They are. And also the people just strolling through like it's just like a casual day on the town or something. Like they're not really bothered.
Yeah, the Israeli Defense Forces, man, they came into this town after dealing with the terrorists on the outskirts, and of course with everything going on horrendously as it was, they just go in and go, hey everyone, sorry to let y'all know, but currently the town is being massacred at the moment. We're going to get y'all out of here. Is that okay? Yeah, is it okay if I take the dog? Yeah, sure, why not? Come and take the dog. We'll get y'all all out of here. And then they just walk them out. I've got to say, just massive credit to the level of calmness and professionalism to the IDF in getting these folks out. You never see this kind of level of professionalism often. Even in Ukraine, sometimes it can get very tense and people do start to lose their cool a little bit, although it's not often. And these guys just came in with nerves of steel, handled the terrorists, and then handled the citizens and got them out of there. Just massive balls on these folks, and huge respect to him for being able to conduct this so well. Moving on from that clip, which, by the way, was from the first days. It's not a video clip from today. This is just footage that was uncovered today, and so we put it out onto the stream. But that is the kind of forces, that's the IDF we're going to see pushing into the Gaza Strip, are those very soldiers with that kind of training, that kind of professionalism, and those kinds of nerves of steel. And going off of that, I'm very confident that the Israeli Defense Forces are going to have a successful mission inside the Gaza Strip trying to dismantle the Hamas governance of the area. But with that, that is largely all of the Middle Eastern news that we have at the moment, from everywhere. The U.S. forces in Syria and Iraq, Kuwait, also the U.S. situation inside of the United States as far as the U.S. government went, as well as the situation in Israel. That's almost all the video clips that we have from today. And so moving on out of that news segment, we're now going to be moving on into something that I've seen is popularly demanded. We've actually been trying to make sure that our news segment is a little bit more lean than it used to be, but considering that so many of y'all are requesting this, we're going to make sure to throw it on in if we can, and that is going to be the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on day 609 of the war. And so, without further ado, here is the speech, and let me make sure to get everything set up right. And
speech!
Here we go.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці і українки. Сьогодні насичений день, багато міжнародної роботи. Відбувся черговий саміт Кримської платформи, її парламентського виміру. Перший такий саміт був проведений торік в Хорватії, тепер другий в Чехії. Я вдячний нашим чеським партнерам за допомогу в організації саміту. Потужна декларація саміту, підтримка України, нашої територіальної цілісності та суверенітету, необхідності звільнити всю нашу землю від окупанта і всіх наших людей з російської неволі. Підтримка нашої формули миру, чіткий голос за посилення тиску на Росію та саме таку допомогу Україні, яка потрібна для перемоги в цій війні. Дякую Руслану Стефанчуку та усій команді Верховної Ради України та залучених державних інституцій за блискуче проведений саміт. Цього разу майже 70 делегацій парламентів різних країн світу. Якісні заяви. Незмінна увага демократичного світу до України, до нашого захисту. Я звернувся до учасників саміту та окреслив нашу тактику щодо Чорноморського регіону та Криму. Попри багато сумнівів, які були у різних світових суб'єктів, Україна довела, що здатна перемагати попри всі складнощі саме у Чорноморському регіоні. Це дійсно історичне досягнення, коли російський флот тікає не лише із західної частини моря, але вже навіть із Криму. Втім, це для окупантів сенсу не матиме. І хочу зараз окремо сказати усім нашим людям в Криму, в Севастополі, в усіх окупованих районах півдня та сходу нашої держави, у поки що окупованих районах. Дорогі українці, усі ви відчуваєте, що російська присутність на нашій землі не назавжди. Я знаю це. Україна поверне свою територію, своїх людей. Ми нікого окупантам не залишимо. І всіма засобами працюємо заради того, аби ця війна завершилась поразкою окупантів. Взяв участь сьогодні і в засіданні колегії єврокомісарів, вагомої інституції ЄС на чолі з президенткою Єврокомісії Урсулою фон дер Ляйн. Крок за кроком ми рухаємось до історичного досягнення у відносинах з Європою. Ми працюємо заради того, щоб вже цього року були відкриті переговори про членство України в ЄС. Є суттєві законодавчі новації, є необхідні кроки в розбудові інституцій. Окрім очевидного доленосного значення для нас, як для держави, початок переговорів з ЄС щодо членства матиме також і суттєвий практичний ефект тут і зараз. Для усіх наших людей, для наших воїнів. Мотивація – це теж зброя, і її також треба перезаряджати. Ми очікуємо цього потужного заряду для української мотивації. Готовності з боку ЄС розпочати переговори з Україною. Відповідного політичного рішення. Я дякую усім партнерам, які його наближають спільно із нами. Ще кілька речей. Сьогодні в Німеччині розпочав роботу черговий українсько-німецький бізнес-форум. Головне на форумі представлена наша оборонна промисловість, наша енергетика, інфраструктура. Є хороші домовленості, спільні проекти. Я вдячний і особисто канцлеру Олафу Шольцу, і його урядовій команді, і усьому суспільству Німеччини. Наш рівень відносин зараз та довіри між Україною та Німеччиною дійсно найвищий за всі роки незалежності. Готуємо ще одну потужну міжнародну зустріч щодо української формули миру на рівні радників та спеціальних представників. Скоро вже майже рік, як були представлені пункти формули миру, і за цей рік зроблено багато. Наша формула миру поступово стає глобальною. Зараз Офіс та МЗС працюють над розширенням кола учасників зустрічі. Вже розуміємо, що будуть представлені всі континенти. Дякую кожному і кожній у світі, хто допомагає Україні наближати справедливий мир. Я хочу сьогодні ще окремо відзначити Данію. Зустрівся з міністром оборони Данії, обговорили подальшу нашу співпрацю, підготовку нового оборонного пакету підтримки. Кожен день, кожен тиждень ми використовуємо для того, щоб наша держава стала сильніше. Слава українським воїнам, слава усьому нашому народу, слава Україні!
And Herom Slava.
And Rom Slava. And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, and that moves us on into our next segment, which is us getting to talk to all of y'all. And it's going to be pretty fun because we have a lot to talk about. And of course, a lot of y'all have many questions as well. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And we have polls to cover. And the first one says, Erdogan says today that Hamas is not a terrorist group, and he downplays their atrocities. And what are your thoughts? 55% said, let's keep an eye on Turkey. 37% said Erdogan and Turkey are now enemies. 6% said, maybe it was a misspeak. And 3% said, I agree with Erdogan. He's right. And under no circumstance is Erdogan correct. Hamas is a terrorist group through and through. And there's not too many people out there that would argue that they are not. Erdogan, in my opinion today, marked himself as an enemy. He had always been on the fence a little bit about between democracy and also authoritarianism, which is what Putin supports. And I think Turkey has kind of aligned itself very wrongly after today. And we should keep a sharp eye on them because I don't think that there's someone we want to turn a blind eye to. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that the statements by Erdogan today are some of the most deplorable statements that I've seen. Considering that he's downplaying the situation with Israel and the Palestinians, what the Palestinians did to Israel, that is something that is quite shocking to me. Not really out of character, though, for Erdogan, if we're being honest, but still very shocking to see. I believe that we should start to look at Turkey a little bit of a different way. Of course, Turkey has a very interesting history. I want to make that quite clear. Many of y'all have heard me always say very great things about Turkey and their culture and their history and everything, especially over the past 100 years. But Erdogan is moving Turkey down a path that isn't a great one. And I don't really like the idea of trying to downplay the actions of terrorist organizations. That would be like, I don't know, Germany downplaying the actions of the Nazis, or, you know, anyone else really downplaying the actions. I mean, if
and here's the thing I'd like to quickly explain, because I know some people, some people have certain mindsets, and they're just kind of normal ones around the world. Some people say that what Palestine did is completely reasonable and rational, just running across the border and killing thousands of people just because they're a little angry. Well, if that's true, then is it acceptable for the American, on the American frontier in the Wild West, for the U.S. cavalry to go out there and massacre a whole bunch of Indians and Wounded Knee just because we got a little angry at them? No. It's not. And I think everyone's probably very clear on that mindset. No, that's not a good thing to do, to go out there and just massacre a load of innocent civilians, even back then. Although that was largely kind of just the norm back then, still not acceptable. Why would that be acceptable now, just because you agree with these people, for some reason or another? Shouldn't we condemn terrorist groups regardless whether we agree with them, like whether you agree with them or not? Shouldn't we go and, of course, condemn all of them for conducting actions against civilians, and particularly against them? I mean, like, look at that video we saw from Bet Array. The Hamas wasn't even trying. They weren't even attempting to fight the IDF. They ran away like cowards as soon as the IDF showed up. They were intent on just killing as many innocent people that were unarmed as they could. That's much like the Nazis did in World War II in Germany. That's a lot like what the Chinese are doing right now in their own country against certain groups. That's a lot like what the Russians are doing against the Ukrainians. And it is wrong on every single instance. Why in the world are some people considering it okay in this instance? I have no idea why. I can't even really explain why it would be, because it's the same as every other one. And everyone keeps on saying, and well, not everyone. And when I say everyone, I'm kind of making a generalization there, because a lot of y'all are not everyone. Y'all are the opposite of everyone in this instance. But a lot of people keep on saying that it's Palestine's land. Why? I'm not really understanding why. Because a lot of people are saying, well, because they were there. Yeah, there was also a decent amount of Russians living in the Donbass and Crimea throughout the times of the Soviet Union. Doesn't mean that Russia owns it. Ukraine had it first, historically, and they will always have it because it's their land. And it's also a part of their internationally recognized borders. Same with Israel. Hamas is not trying to, just, poke the IDF and have the IDF move out of the Gaza Strip. The IDF was never even in the Gaza Strip. So Hamas is attacking Israel because their overall plan is to end up taking over all of Israel, kicking all of the Jews out, or genociding them, one or the other, and then take the land. That's not anything I would support. And I know I know a lot of people. I know that people nowadays, some people, not a lot of them, operate off of emotions, and while it's completely unacceptable and abhorrent in one direction, it's completely acceptable in another direction to do the same thing just because you agree with it. I'm not into that. I'm completely into denouncing terroristic actions from Russia, from China, from Palestine, from Iran, from anyone, Hamas as well. And so I would say, yeah, I don't really think it's a good thing to support Hamas at all. And I think that Erdogan is taking a very bad path down a slippery slope that's going to probably lead Turkey to be a uneasy friend, or maybe even not a friend, of NATO and the rest of Europe as a whole, or really the Western world. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, another thing, let's see here, I see a lot of people, Derek said, tell the enforcer that people don't like Israel because they illegally bought Arab land. Why in the world was it?
Bought it.
Why in the world was it? Well, no, I know exactly what he's talking about. It wasn't illegally bought because the Ottomans were allowing for anyone to buy large plots of land at the time, and because of that, a lot of Jews arrived in the area of what's now Tel Aviv and just started buying up massive plots of land and started to build themselves a city there. That wasn't illegal. That was entirely legal, and was something that was sanctioned by the Ottoman Empire itself. So there was nothing illegal with that. There was nothing illegal during the Palestine Mandate as well, under British rule, of Israelis entering the region. In fact, it was strongly encouraged by the British, and it was an entirely legal process with all of the Israelis arriving, or more so all of the Jews arriving that would then later become what is Israel today. That is something that was an ongoing process that was completely accepted. It was also encouraged as well. It was encouraged by the British. It was encouraged by the Germans in the 30s, funnily enough. That's something that many people actually will not know about, and something I actually didn't know about until I started reading into it. The Germans, of course, when a certain group came into power that would then conduct the Holocaust, they actually encouraged Jewish people, about 500,000 of them, to immigrate to Israel to just get out of Germany. Well, of course, they didn't pay for anything. They just kind of forced them to go, and they had no possessions when they arrived in Israel. But nevertheless, that's also how about 500,000 Jews ended up escaping the Holocaust before World War II even began, is because they migrated to Israel. Going off of that, that's something that I would have to say, you can't really fault them for that. I mean, like, they did everything under a legal process at the time. It was accepted by the British. It was accepted by the Ottomans. The Ottomans were a Muslim nation, an Islamic nation. They were the caliphate. Back when the Islamic faith actually had a caliphate, a real one, not a fake one, the Ottomans were it. And they were allowing these Jewish people to buy up the land at Tel Aviv. It was an entirely legal thing. So, you know, you can't really blame them for that. That's like saying that someone bought a house and then later on it's found out that it's like sacred Native American land, and then blaming those people and acting like they knew that. No, they didn't. They went there and bought it. It was an entirely legal thing. But moving on from that, everything that the Jewish people did arriving in Israel, or Palestine, whatever you want to call it, was entirely legal from start to finish. The first problems began once the Islamic Arabs of the region realized that the influx of Jewish migrants were about to start tipping the scales, where the Jewish people would start to be about equally represented as the Islamic Arabs. And that's when the first clashes started to happen, and it was largely attacks against the Jewish people that had arrived. Something similar to the pogroms you would see inside of the modern area of Ukraine under the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union. And so I hope that addresses that story fairly well. Go ahead.
And also, another thing that I've noticed, I don't know a ton about the Israeli-Palestine relations, but one thing I have noticed is Palestine indirectly supports Hamas, even though they claim that they don't. They are indirectly supporting it nonetheless. And I know people are going to disagree with that 100%, but at the same time, those same people will argue that Hezbollah doesn't represent Iran, which they also do on that front as well. And to me, why does a place need to resort to terrorism to try to get their point across instead of simply negotiating and coming to a sensible conclusion to the issue? Why did they have to resort to that? Because I don't see Israel engaged in terrorism to try to get their point across the way that the Hamas and also the Hezbollah are doing. But you do see the other side doing it. I do notice that.
And also, another thing that I've seen, because there's some interesting comments coming up, Yu Lu said they bought some land, but the majority of Israel's land was not bought. Oh, yeah, you're right. It was actually given to them by the British. And when the nation carves up borders, it doesn't really matter how screwed up they are, you know, because people say that Syria and Iraq's borders are screwed up due to the French-Syrian mandate and also the Lebanese mandate, as well as the British-Iraq mandate, kind of carving up the borders we see today. That's still their right to do. The British and the French were administering these territories. They get to carve up the borders however they want. And if they decide that Israel gets this land, then that's the British's fault. The Hamas has a problem with the British administration from the 1930s, more so than the Israelis of today, because a lot of the borders you see here right now, except for the area of Nazareth, which was once Palestinian territory, all of that was given to them by the British. They really didn't have a lot of say in that. But once it was given by the British, all hell broke loose. There were, and also, by the way, at that time, there was no forceful evictions yet, because there were forceful evictions of Palestinians from the area of Israel, but it wasn't at that time. It's just, that's going to be specifically Israeli land administered by the Jewish Israelis, and then this is going to be Palestine, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and also another area that was up near the area of Nazareth. They said that was going to be Palestinian, the other part was going to be Israeli, the Muslims own this one area, the Jews own the other. And then the Muslims went, nope, that's unacceptable, we got to have it all. And these Jews, these terrible Jews that we just hate so much, they can't be here, we're going to start killing them. And so then that's what started the Israeli War of Independence of 1947 to 1948. The Israelis would end up victorious, and then once they ended up winning, the Israelis, the Jewish Israelis, a lot of them Holocaust survivors, a lot of them just went through that horror and torture inside of Europe, then arrive here, and then they have a group of people, specifically Arabian Islamic people, who want to conduct another genocide on them just because they arrived here because the British allowed them to. And then they go, these people want to kill us. We can't have these people on our borders of what we've now declared as Israel, because they made it quite clear they are going to be constantly trying to kill us. And so they then forced a lot of them, evicted them from their homes to the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And then from there, immediately, the Fedayeen, which was the first terrorist organization within the area of Palestine, was created, and then would do what we see Hamas doing today. They would cross the border from the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, conduct terroristic attacks on innocent, unarmed Israeli civilians, and then cross the border and eventually keep on until in one day, in their mind, at some point, they'll be able to kill all of the Jewish Israelis, and they'll be able to take over the land for Palestine. When you put it that way, and you put the whole story out there like that, you can get a good reason why these Jewish Israelis, because of course Israel is mostly Jewish, are pretty adamant and pretty hard set on their ways. And you can kind of get it when you look at their entire history. And a lot of people always want to paint the Palestinians to be the innocent victims. I can't really paint them as that, considering that historically, after the Balfour Declaration, they were the first to attack the other. They kind of started this thing. You can't really control how the Israelis respond. So beyond that point, it is what it is to me. And also this two-state solution thing that keeps being brought up. I did some very brief research on that today. That seems like that would not succeed under any circumstance, because the way I understand it is they want the Palestinians and the Israelis to co-govern. Is that the correct way to understand it, Enforcer? Yes. How in the hell is that ever going to work? Because those two groups hate each other very badly. That would be... I don't even understand what's being proposed.
I don't really know why either, because it's clear that the two groups don't get along. So I have no idea why they're trying to propose that either. And also, I saw someone say, and before the Jews inhabited it, it was by the Egyptians. No. I have to say no pretty fervently on that one, because, of course, at the time, history wasn't being recorded the way a lot of us would record history today. The best examples that we have of history at the time come from the Bible, just to put that out there, because funnily enough, I know some people are going to go, and freak out and everything, because I know that's just going to happen. But funnily enough, if you get a history major like me and you go through college for 4 years learning history, you find out from the history professors that the Bible is actually used as an accredited source of historical knowledge, because it really was the only written account of what was happening in this area of the Middle East before history was even being written. So it's the best accounts that we have to go off of, at least for statements of fact. And based off of statements of fact that are found in the Bible, which we assume were written at the time that this stuff was happening, or at least within the several decades surrounding it, the Jewish people were living in the area of the Kingdom of Judea before the Egyptians were there. The Egyptians invaded the area, enslaved the Jewish people, and then moved a decent amount of them back to Europe. And then, of course, a good amount of them went into a diaspora once again throughout the area of the Middle East, and then were returned once the Egyptians had been defeated. But then that wouldn't last for long either. But still, from what we know historically, and of course that's largely based off of the Bible, because once again, it's really the only historical written account from the time. No one was really writing history at that time of history, funnily enough. From what we understand, the Jews were there before everyone else, according to written accounts. So, that's what it is. I mean, I can't really work off of more than that. That's really all we have. And so, that is what it is. And also, really quickly, just to put that out there, I know that religion is a very strong thing, and that's why I'm not going into, the religious side of things. Of course, I'm a Christian, but that's a whole other thing. I'm only going into what history determines is true. And from what historical researchers, and by the way, just to let you all know, one of my professors that I was able to have classes with is one of the leading writers and leading authors of books on ancient antiquity, and specifically in the area of Jordan, Egypt, and inside of Israel, modern day Israel. According to him, the Bible is really the only source of historical information that can be found beyond everything else in the Bible about, what God did and everything like that. That largely is cast aside for the historical side of things. It is just looked at the specific time and dates that are mentioned inside the Bible of who was where and who was doing what, because it's generally pretty accurate from what we can tell based off of archaeological finds and everything else with who was where and doing what at the time. And so based off of that,
We know that ancient Judean cultures existed inside of Israel well before everything else. And even then, by the time Islam existed as a religion, history was being written at that point for about the past 700 years. So it was really hard to say that for that 700-year period of history, where it's known that there are a large amount of Jews inside of Israel, like, for example, within the Roman province of Palestina, which is, I believe, what the Romans called it. It was, of course, known there were nothing but Jews there. There were no Islamic people or Muslim people there at that point because they didn't even exist. They wouldn't even exist for the next 500 years. So who in the world? Like, I don't know how people can say it's Islamic land because historically they came around after the Israelis did, the Jewish Israelis did. That would be like going up into Ukraine and saying, while the Kievan Rus existed first, and they are the the ancient predecessor to Ukraine, the Russians own it because they were there at some point for the past 300 years. That makes no sense as an argument. It just doesn't.
It really doesn't. It's at some point, everyone owned some piece of land at some point. The United States wasn't always the United States. It was here, the indigenous people here had the land. You could say they owned it. You could say they were here and occupied it, whatever you want to say. No land has been exclusively owned by one group of people throughout history, the entire thing. It simply hasn't happened. So when you try to go back a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades ago, and you say, that was our land, 30 or 40 years ago, we want it back. Well, it's like, well, you don't have it now. And now you're trying to go back, now that there's a established state there with a full-on government and its own population of people that are living their own lives, and you want to go try to take it back. Why would you do that unless you just want to start a massive war?
And also, another thing to point out as well is that while Matthew's saying that, historical legitimacy is a big deal. And usually the mindset is the first people that were there are the ones who kind of have domain on the land. For example, there really is no one that can say that Saudi Arabia is Saudi Arabia rather than the Bedouin tribes that roamed the deserts of Saudi Arabia where it is today. They're really the only ones that have a legitimate claim to that. Culturally, they have been there for thousands of years. So they're really the only ones that you can say, yeah, that's Saudi Arabia. The land is kind of owned by the cultural group of the Bedouins because they've been there forever. It's kind of like Ukraine. Ukraine's existed as a country from about the 900 ADs. It was a group of Vikings that settled the area. They were really the first ones to actually settle the area for the most part. And from then on, the Ukrainian cultural group has domain over that land. Legitimately, it would be theirs. It's the cultural birthplace of the Ukrainians, so therefore it's their land. Same with the British. You can't have the French say, yes, this is my land. It doesn't make any sense. Culturally, there are no French people there. It's all British people. And it's been British people forever. It doesn't matter what's happened over the ebb and flow of history, and if there somehow ended up being a decent amount of French people in Cornwall, it's still culturally and historically British land. So with that, I hope that.
And also another practical, view of the situation is if you aren't able to defend and hold your land, the unfortunate reality is in real life you lose the land, and if somebody else gets it and holds it and they're able to defend it better than you can, you don't get it back. I mean, sometimes it's unfair, but that's just the way it works. That's why we're arming Ukraine so well, so that way they can defend and hold their land, because if they lose it, the odds of them getting it back are probably slim to none, and, once it's gone, it's gone.
And I would agree with that completely. And so with that, I hope we addressed that poll fairly well. We've been going on for a good while on this stuff. But with that, we are on to the... Also, by the way, everyone, if y'all could, please put no religion in the chat or your opinions on religion. The only reason I was bringing up the Bible is because it's a used historical reference in the profession of history. And the only reason I know that, because I know some people are about to say, that's not true. Well, I'm a history major with a bachelor's degree in history. So if anyone would know it, I have a feeling I would, because I spent a lot of money in about 4 years to figure that out. So, not trying to pull rank on anyone there, but, if you're going to try and argue with me what's considered a historical account and what isn't, considering I spent 4 years learning what is and what isn't, I have a feeling I'd probably know a little bit more on that than just, random Joe Blow who has an opinion. But with that,
I hope that does address it well. Once again, please no religion in the chat or politics, because, you know, it creates some damn horrendous fights, and it's really meaningless because no one really changes their opinion. You all just kind of slaughter each other, and everyone gets pissed. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and our last poll of the last segment says, today Russia struck an ammo depot next to a Ukrainian nuclear power plant and ended up blowing out the windows, and what are your thoughts? 83% said Russia is playing with fire like usual, 9% said unsure, and 8% said, it's not that serious, honestly. And I would have to say, to me, that is very serious. They blew up an ammo depot in such close proximity to a nuclear power plant that it blew out the windows, which is, you know, by common sense tells you that's not good whatsoever. It was apparently pretty close. Russia has been playing with fire when it comes to nuclear power and also weaponry for a long time. I don't know what it is between the Russians and nukes, but like, for example, Chernobyl, they caused that. I don't know if the Russians don't comprehend how serious nuclear technology is or what, but, you know, certainly they're nobody to have around that for certain. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree. The Russians are playing with fire, and I think that they should have the fire removed from them because they are certainly not a good group to have around nuclear technology, even if it's for peaceful means. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and that was our last poll, so we're moving back into our Super Chat questions, and our first one is going to go to, let's see here, Steve Watkins at work, who throws in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Steve, at Watkins, at work, at Watkins. Thank you very much for the support. He says, I figure most people that don't leave a message can't see where to do so. It took me 4 times to see that the line says something about your message and donation will be public, is where you type the message. Oh well, keep up the good work.
And thank you so much for the support, Steve Watkins at Week, and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, that some of these people actually do leave messages. Like Marion Deemer has left messages before, just as an example. But then people, I guess, maybe run out of things to say. So then they just start throwing in the support with no comment. But if y'all do have an issue and y'all don't know where the ability to message in a super chat is, it is right where it says your message and donation will be public. And so you can throw up the message there, and it should be visible as long as it's typed in the right box. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the massive amount of support, Steve Watkins. I don't know why I was about to say Steve Atkins. We're about to go on the Atkins diet, but thank you so much once again, Steve Watkins at work, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because of course, folks like you help this channel to keep on rolling. And if it wasn't for folks like you, this wouldn't be possible. And so thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you once again for enjoying the work we do. And before we move on, really quickly, I see a lot of people saying, I don't know, the Bible isn't a historical reference. A lot of people are saying that with authority. Now, let me go really quickly and explain what is and what isn't historical authority in the Bible. Things in the Bible, such as the trumpets of Jericho, the parting of the Red Sea, things like that in history are not considered historical events because they're, it's something that history just largely excludes. The Bible is used as a historical reference, particularly and explicitly on dates and locations of groups, because history at the time was almost not recorded at all. In fact, it wasn't recorded at all. There was no recording of history at this time. The only historical reference to dates and times where certain groups of people culturally were showing up and what the borders and areas of these nations looked like is in the Bible. Beyond that, no one wrote down who was where. The Egyptians didn't really write it down much, and that's also why there's still a decent amount of talk and discussion on some specific parts of Egyptology, which is the study of Egyptian history, culture, and stuff like that. There's still a lot of discussion. Like, nobody knows where the sea people came from. And that's kind of been a big thing for an incredibly long time, because nobody really wrote down the stuff, or really even cared to document it that much. So nobody knows who the sea people were, where they came from, or why they were there. They were from somewhere, but nobody knows, because nobody really wrote the stuff down that much. So the Bible is a very special exception to that rule, because through the Bible in the Old Testament telling its story, it also starts to describe a lot of what was happening in the area around modern-day Israel. For example, what was happening in the area north, like in Lebanon, or in Syria. It also accounts the stories of the Egyptians' arrival, the arrival of the Greeks. It also accounts the arrival of the Romans as well. most of your larger culture, and also the Sumerians and many others. It goes through and gives us an account of who was where and who was doing what, a lot better than really any other example from the time period, because there are no other examples from the time period. Really, the Bible's the only one that documented it, so it's really the only source that could be taken at face value. Of course, that's really the historical reference I'm talking about, because a lot of people are going to sit there and go, I believe that, Christianity doesn't exist, and I'm not here to argue that. I'm here to argue that it's the only thing from the time period that tells us who was where and who was doing what, specifically the cultural groups and the nations that were present. Like, for example, the only reason that we know that there was a kingdom of Judea is mostly because it's described in the Bible. That's really the only example we have. The Romans, of course, would document that a little bit later, that the Jewish religion was apparently a well-founded one in the area and it existed for an incredibly long time. But that was around, I believe, the time of 60 BC or about 100 BC, somewhere around there. It was an incredibly long time ago. So, of course, it's something that comes a little bit later than the Bible was even writing, which the Bible was writing a while back in the time. I mean, way back in the time. Almost, I believe, back to around, I would have to get an exact date, but somewhere around like 700 BC or 600 BC, which is well before any real historical accounts are from the area. So I'm just trying to, I'm trying to explain to y'all, because this really to me isn't open to discussion, considering I've spent a long time learning about this stuff. The Bible is really the only historical account that we have from the area of who was where, who was doing what kind of conflicts happened, and what happened in that region for several hundred years, up until history actually was recorded in the region by someone. So that's why the Bible is accepted in historical circles as a decent historical text. And really the only one that can be worked off of, because there isn't another one. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Because beyond that, I don't really know where else I could go. I'm just, I'm trying to, and some people are going to take this a bad way, and I'm trying to put this out there the nicest way possible. Is when I say I'm trying to educate people are going to go, "You don't educate me, you asshole," and we're about to get that. But I'm trying to educate y'all on what in the historical field is considered historical text. And the Bible, in certain instances, especially in that context, is historical text. So with that, hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next super chat question, we have one from Aaron, who puts in a very generous $100 donation. Huge shout out to you, Aaron, and thank you very much for that support. And he says, as a Native American, by working together and valuing each other's humanity, we can create a world where everyone is treated with dignity and compassion, regardless of their background or beliefs. And many religious texts offer valuable insights into our shared humanity. And Aaron, I have to say, that is a very noble goal indeed. I think, though, the only way in the unfortunately sick world we live in, where there's a lot of evil people running around in it, we have to get peace through strength. That is the only way to accomplish it. That's the unfortunate reality of life that everyone's having to figure out now, because we got a lot of bad people that are starting to get very chaotic all of a sudden. But hopefully we can get it all under control. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I thank you for the support, Aaron. The massive amount of support, the largest super chat of the night, and helping the channel to keep on running. And also really cool to know that you're a Native American. That's really neat. And it's wonderful to know that everyone from around the world watches the Lee Spring Army, including folks from the Native American groups. That's really neat. I know folks from reenacting that are Native Americans, people from the Navajo Nation, stuff like that. They actually go around and reenact a good deal. And they're always incredibly interesting and neat people to know. And also, the culture of all of the different Native American groups is very interesting to me, because all of them have a different flair and different customs and cultures, of course, unfortunately pushed outside of their previous cultural boundaries. Like, for example, I gotta be honest with y'all, I wish there was a larger presence of Cherokees and Creeks in Alabama, because this is originally where the Creeks and the Cherokees was from the state of Alabama, along with some other Native American groups. And when they were here, their cultural practices were a lot more different than they are in the Indian reservations in Oklahoma and places like that, which is unfortunate, because the landscape and the environment out there doesn't really support the way things used to be. And, historically and culturally, that's a loss. But still, I've got to say, some very honorable goals that you have there, Aaron, and I would love to see that happen one day. And maybe it will, but it's probably a long time down the road, because one thing I know is that it doesn't really change much. And everyone always has huge ambitions, and I myself have huge ambitions. Maybe one day we will be able to see a world like that. And I think we will, as long as people keep optimistic and keep on working towards that future. It eventually will happen, but it might not be within our lifetimes. But still, thank you so much once again for the massive amount of support and helping this channel to keep on running, Aaron. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible. And thank you so much once again for being a longtime member of the Lee Spring Army. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Johnny Cool, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Johnny, as well, for that support. That's very generous of you. And he says, hi all, and watching the stream from Corpus Christi, Texas, home of the USS Lexington. And too bad we no longer have battleships. And great job to both of y'all, and keep up the good work. And thank you very much, Johnny.
And thank you so much, Johnny, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And really cool to know you're watching from Corpus Christi, which I remember, if I'm remembering the story correctly, it was either Galveston or Corpus Christi that was hit by some kind of a blithering hurricane way back at the beginning of the 20th century, and it ended up like wiping out the town. I think it was actually Galveston, if I'm remembering that right. Yeah, I think it was Galveston because it seems like it was in the right place. But still, Corpus Christi. And I think this is the place where the USS Texas, let's see, here's the USS Lexington aircraft carrier, but I think the USS Texas was also around here as well. Because if I remember right, this is some, wait a minute, hang on, is that Galveston? Hang on, let me look up here. Is the San Jacinto, yeah, so here's San Jacinto, and then the USS Texas was out here somewhere at some point. It's been moved to a dry dock, I think in Corpus Christi, but still, really cool to know that you're from there, really neat. And I gotta thank you so much for the support and helping the channel to keep on running, and also, really cool to know that it's home of the USS Lexington, a midway class aircraft carrier, maybe? It looks like one to me. Doesn't tell us here. Maybe I can find out here. It looks like a midway to me. Now I gotta pull it up. I gotta pull this thing up. USS Lexington. Let's see here. USS Lexington, Essex class. So it's not the other one, it's the Essex. That's pretty neat. And thank you so much for the support and sharing that with us. Always love to take a look at a historic ship. And also, hopefully the USS Texas will be back at its mooring near the San Jacinto Park here in the future. But still, thank you so much once again for encouraging us to keep up the good work, because we are trying our best, and I hope that we're keeping up to standard tonight. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $22 super chat from Junebug without the 72 on the end. And thank you very much, Junebug, for that support. And no comment to address, but as always, thank you very much for helping to keep the channel running, and we do appreciate it very much. We also have a $50 super chat from Knuckles. And thank you very much, Knuckles, for that support. He says, we've been attacked 13 times in last week. Why haven't we responded? Do you think that makes us look weak? Also, have you seen the buildup in military in Egypt? If so, thoughts? And been here since day 3, but had to take a break to 2 family deaths, and keep up the good work.
Oh, yikes. I hate to hear that, Knuckles.
Goodness.
That's very unfortunate. And to try and answer your question, I think we haven't responded. I think at this point, at least to me, and I could be wrong because we're crystal balling here, and we never know what the U.S. government's really going to do because it could go 2 ways, but I feel like the U.S. government is going to be responding in an armed way to what's been happening in the Middle East. I think that's an inevitable consequence of what's been going on here. I think we're waiting for the forces to be built up strong enough in the region, though, that we can, of course, lash back, but not end up losing the region. I think that's mainly what we're doing right now. In that vein, I don't think it makes us look weak, but on the surface level look of it, it does make us look weak. That's an undeniable fact, considering that U.S. bases are still being attacked right now. U.S. soldiers getting injured. There's now reports of traumatic brain injury in some of them, which is very serious, and we're still not doing anything. I think this is a pretty good, well, not a pretty good, a pretty bad look for the United States, because it makes it look like we're not responding. But I'm fairly certain we have to have something cooking up in the background as far as a response, because that would be pretty wild to see this many attacks happen on so many different U.S. bases, so many U.S. soldiers get injured, so much equipment get destroyed and damaged, and then do nothing in return. That would be a massive blunder, in my opinion, on the U.S. government's end if we do not respond in some way to attacks on U.S. forces. And so, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. I haven't really heard about a specific military buildup in Egypt. We have heard about a military buildup in Iraq, Syria, and Saudi Arabia as well as the UAE, but I haven't really heard about it in other places like Egypt that much. So I really wouldn't be able to give thoughts on that. But still, thank you so much for the mass amount of support, Knuckles, and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you that make the channel possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Aaron Shu, and he puts in a $25 super chat, and thank you very much, Aaron Shu, for that support. We had both Aarons tonight. He said, interesting side note that hasn't been discussed to my knowledge is with all the strikes occurring, it may have an impact to manufacturing, even during Wartime Production Act. And hello from Harbor Beach, Michigan. LSA, IL, and UA.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support. And also, being from Michigan, that's really cool. One second. Matthew, I'm trying to find the freaking super chat here, and I'm having a hard time finding it. Let's see here. One second. I'm looking through it again.
Harbor Beach, Michigan?
Harbor Beach, Michigan. I'm looking for Harbor Beach, Michigan. I'll be damned. It's not showing up in my super chat log for some reason. Why? Why is that the case? Because I always go back and read them nowadays. Like, I actually have a little window up where I can read all of them and make sure to keep up the track. So, thank you for being from Michigan. Really cool to know, because the Saginaw Steering Gear Division is from Michigan. Really cool, by the way. And they produce some really neat guns in World War II, M1 carbines. And I got to thank you so much once again for supporting this channel and helping us to keep it running. And also, Matthew, can you reread his super chat again, just to make sure I can respond to all of it?
It says, interesting side note that hasn't been discussed to my knowledge is that with all the strikes occurring, it may have an impact to manufacturing even during the Wartime Production Act.
And that is true to a good bit. But even still, I think that means that the U.S. war industry should just ramp up even further to try and respond. The U.S. is the second largest industrial manufacturer in the world. I know many of y'all have heard that we're not, and we've fallen off of the great times, but honestly, as far as manufacturing goes, compared to everyone but China, we are still the industrial powerhouse of the world. And there really is no one that even gets close to us outside of China, and they beat us by a good, well, not even by a lot. I think it's by several, I think it's by like 12%, honestly. It's not that big of a difference, but still, moving on from that, the U.S. industry can certainly respond. Factories that produce civilian goods right now, or just commercial goods, can be converted into war production. And that's something that could definitely happen, where you don't even have to try and find new employees to do these jobs. The employees that were producing microwaves one day are now producing artillery shells the next day. It's something that you can do. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and thank you for being a Leaf Spring Army viewer from Michigan, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and our next one goes to Surprise It's Us, who puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much for that support. And he said, in memory of CME4PC, I wish you could add the LSA Warriors that we have lost.
And I thank you so much for the support, and I thank you for also honoring CME4PC. And we have thought about having a way to honor and remember all of the LSA members who have, of course, passed away from when this channel started. But we actually don't know, beyond Anthony Bestwick, which I'm assuming has passed away at this point because we haven't seen him back.
He's actually here tonight.
Really?
Yes.
What?
Yeah, he's here.
No way.
He's here.
No way, man. That's crazy. Okay, so except for excluding Anthony Bestwick because he is alive, CME4PC is really the only member of the Leaf Spring Army that I know of that is it has passed away. And so we will probably be trying to do something special to figure out some way to remember Leaf Spring Army members who have passed. And also, that's pretty wild to hear that Anthony Bestwick is here, because if I remember correctly, I did hear that the ship throw in the super chats a while ago that said he was in pretty tough shape and was going to be going into hospice. But apparently, there must have been a reversal of that or something, because he's here. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you so much once again for the support. And that's it. And that's interesting to see. But with that, thank you once again, and we are on to the next one. We will be trying to find a way to do something to commemorate CME4PC. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right. And also, Anthony Bestwick put in a $5 super chat. And thank you very much, Anthony, for that support. And also, it's good to hear from you once again. I'm glad to hear that everything is apparently going well, even though there was no comment to address. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I thank you so much for the support, Anthony. And he did throw in a £5 British. which does confirm that is the Anthony Bestwick I'm talking about, because the Anthony Bestwick that said that he was getting in rough shape and was going into hospice was from the UK. So apparently Anthony Bestwick is still going strong and he's back. So good to hear that you are in good shape and that you are still around. Because I remember back in the day, you had me feeling pretty bad. Like I was feeling terrible that you were in bad shape. So it is good to know that you're still fine and you're still out there and you're still kicking. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support, Anthony. I hope that does address that well. And I hate to have signed you off so early without any confirmation, because now we see that you are alive and perfectly, well, hopefully perfectly well, although we don't really know for sure. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Fly Eagles Fly, who puts in a $20 super chat. And very nice, and thank you very much for that support. And said, still keeping up the good work, and I watch whenever I get the opportunity. And good job expanding the channel and covering the Israeli conflict. The Eagles are 6-1 and are heading towards another Super Bowl.
Hey, let's get it! And thank you so much for the support, Fly Eagles Fly, helping this channel to keep on running. And also, it's also great to see that you are back. We've been wondering where you've been. We've also been wondering where a few viewers have been. Like, for example, Confarelli, who had been here for a bit. I actually heard that his schedule changed for his work, so he can't actually watch because he's working at that time. But hopefully he will be back on air sometime in the future, too, because whenever Elite Spring Army members are missing, we do notice. We notice every single time. We have noticed with you, Fly Eagles Fly, that you have been missing at least from the live chat a good bit. But welcome back, and it's great to have you back on air. And thank you so much as well for supporting the channel and helping us to keep this thing alive, too. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And I hope for your sake that the Eagles do well this year. I don't really get into sports much, but I'll root for the Eagles just for you. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
All right, and our next one goes to Steve Trouble, who puts in a 20 and says, so if you were president, as an independent to avoid politics of the USA, how would you have treated Israel and the Middle East to have prevented the escalation that we see?
Restate that one again, Matthew, so I can have a moment to think.
If you were the U.S. president, U.S. president, as an independent, how would you have treated Israel and the Middle East to prevent the escalation that we see?
Let's say it's the party of the LSA. Let's say that we have an LSA party. I'm the president, and it's my party for the most part. So I'm kind of like laying out the doctrine for what this party will be. The original mindset. It's really hard to make a decision because you either support Israel or you don't. That's really the only way that you can go about the situation in Israel. Now we've seen that both sides largely support Israel. The majority do, at least. There's really no change that you can make.
Now, Enforcer, while you think about your policy and stuff, I will say one thing that we could have done to prevent the situation that is currently happening is there was apparently some kind of disconnect between the intel that was gathered on the ground, because there was warning signs and there were intel reports indicating that Gaza was going to do what it did. But for some reason, the government in Israel didn't act on it. And there are even some rumors that it never even made it to Netanyahu himself for him to review it. If the CIA or the American intelligence agencies or some other Western intel agency would have stepped in and emphasized the importance of that intel, this might have been preventable. But apparently, a lot of people were asleep at the wheel, not just Israel. And this ended up happening, and it's going to end up costing us in the long run.
So to try and get an answer here on the question of what I would do after Matthew's given his statement, the best thing I'd say to do is to support Israel, much like both other groups have. But also, instead of taking a backseat to this, I think we should have gone headlong and actually attempted to dismantle Hezbollah and Hamas when they were being formed. We can't retroactively change history, so we can't do that. So with the current situation we have right now, I think that the United States, of course, shouldn't get directly involved. We should support Israel like we are going to and encourage them to crush Hezbollah and Hamas as best as they can, or at least ensure that if they ever reappear, they won't have the abilities to do anything like they're doing right now. These groups are not just anti-Israeli, they're anti-American, because Iran is anti-American, so of course they're going to share the same mindset as well. And I think that we need to ensure that anti-American forces around the world are crushed. I also would have ensured that Iran would have thought twice about anything going on here. I believe it would have been pertinent to make sure that nuclear technology of any kind in Iran was never around because, and I have to say this, I think this was a failing on both sides. Some people said they can have peaceful nuclear technology, and we're going to try and make treaties to make sure that they develop nuclear technology for peaceful means. And then some people said we're not going to have a treaty at all, which then doesn't really stop them from doing anything. I think it would have been a better mindset that as soon as we heard that the Iranians were possibly starting to work on nuclear technology, that we conduct a precise strike into Iran to destroy those abilities. And whenever need be, we continue to conduct those strikes. It's quite clear that U.S. relations with Iran are never going to improve, so we don't really have to worry about souring relations with them. They're already as bad as they can be at all times. So if we see that they're starting to develop some kind of a nuclear technology or a nuclear facility, just destroy it off the bat before things can get bad. And of course, the radioactivity from that kind of stuff would not be bad. It wouldn't be severe because there wouldn't be an operational reactor. There wouldn't be an operational nuclear weapon that you're striking. You're just striking their enrichment facility or something similar. So that way they end up not having the ability and they have to start from scratch again. And also Angry Penguin said we've been messing with the reactors. And we have, but it's been really passive to the point it just kind of slows them down for like a few months, but it doesn't actually stop them dead in their tracks. Blowing up their enrichment facilities would stop them dead in their tracks. And I'm not saying get involved in a full-on war with Iran, because that would be too costly and too time-consuming. Just strike the pertinent facilities and then move on. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Avdiivka, who puts in a $20 donation and says, thanks.
And thank you so much for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. And thank you for enjoying it enough to say thanks. It means a lot to us, and thank you once again. And so with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you for being a Avdiivka. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Stindy Mitchell, who puts in a 20 as well, and says, Chuck Ferrier says SEAL Team 6 and Delta Force are in Israel. And what are your thoughts?
And, wait a minute, reread that one again?
Chuck Ferrier says SEAL Team 6 and Delta Force are in Israel. And what are your thoughts?
From what we understand, at this point, they probably are, or they're on the aircraft carriers at sea that are right outside of Israel. So wherever they are pretty much ready to go for whatever Israel may need. So I would say that's most likely true. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. Hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we have a 20 from Vance Hicks, who says, Enforcer Turkey has always been problematic. And does the NATO charter allow for kicking members out, or is it kind of mafia-like?
It's kind of mafia-like a little bit, but at the same time, we've heard that there's a possibility that a country could be kicked out, but we've never seen it happen. Also, another thing is, I would actually have to disagree with you there about Turkey always being problematic. Turkey really never was problematic until about the late 90s when Erdogan started to come around. Because up until then, Turkey operated a lot like a European country governmentally. It had a constitution almost identical to France's constitution that they used for the Third and Fourth Republic. They also had a really honestly, Turkey was a very normal country up until the late 90s. It was just like every other European country. And that's why they were so easily accepted into NATO, because there was really nothing different in between Turkey and every other country in Europe. It was entirely different than the Ottoman Empire that existed before Turkey came around. That changed when Erdogan came into power, because Erdogan is something, well, at least of what they call in Turkey, and it's not comparable to anything else in the Islamic world. They call him a conservative Muslim. And the thing about that is that Turkey's version of that is completely different than everyone else's. So it's not like, Hamas or Hezbollah or anything. It's just Turkey's version of it, which is entirely different and it will take forever to explain. So I'm not, because it's not worth it. Go pull up a video from Kraut. Kraut made like 3 1-hour length documentaries each on 2-hour documentaries each on Turkey, and they're all very well researched and very well put out. So I'd highly recommend that as a source. But that's when Turkey kind of became problematic, because the way that they existed for nearly 100 years before that started to shift. So I would say they're not that big of a problem until now. But with that, I thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And I got to be honest with y'all, just to put this out there, and I gotta preface this with saying I am a religious person. I am a Christian after all. Just putting that out there. We don't advertise that a lot because that's really no one's business. But as far as it comes to governance, I believe in the concept of a separation of church and state. One, for the protection of religion from the state, and also the protection of state from religion. It's something that I think is not really good to have in politics as any kind of religious sway. I think that things should largely remain separated, and that's something that you see a lot of countries run into issues with once the church becomes a part of the state or the state becomes a part of the church. Just going to put that out there outright. The founding fathers of the United States had a very good concept in mind with the separation of church and state. And so with that, hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $20 super chat from Yuri Ash, who is from Israel, and says, thanks for sharing your knowledge in a respectful way. I respect that, and keep up the good work, supposing the truth.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. Also, I've seen a lot of Israeli viewers tonight throwing in super chats. I hope Yuri Bench is okay, because we still haven't seen Yuri Bench around for a little bit. But nevertheless, thank you so much once again for support and enjoying this channel and helping us to keep it running. And also, by the way, on your offer of sharing with us some news that we haven't been able to receive yet, and it may be exclusive, DM us on Twitter, on our Twitter account. That'll probably be the best way to send us the news that you've been able to find there. And if we can show it on stream, we most likely will put it into that segment. And so with that, thank you so much once again for enjoying this channel and helping us to keep this thing running, because folks like you help to make this possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and the next one goes to Rotor Max, who puts in a 20 as well, and says, did you guys see where Ukraine came out with a small 4-wheel drone that can deliver an anti-tank mine, and it's called a honey badger?
We saw that thing in operation, I think, last week. And also, we didn't know it was called a honey badger. That is really cool. Maybe it's a reference to the Lee Spring Army. Who knows? But still, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And really quickly, Matthew, I have to address a live chat, because someone said the separation of church and state isn't a part of the founding fathers. Yes, it is. It's the First Amendment in the Bill of Rights, which was brought about by the founding fathers during the Constitutional Convention of 1787. Which was all of the founding fathers thing. And so, you know, oh, wait a minute, I think I may have misunderstood that. I think that may have been written wrong, because then he said, wait a minute, hang on, oh, no. They didn't have the idea of church over state. That is not an Enlightenment ideal. And also, if you ever read anything from the Enlightenment thinkers like Benjamin Franklin, who were very important founding fathers, that was not the mindset of all. If so, how come there was never an official religion of the United States? There never was one. And if church was over state, obviously there would be an official religion of the U.S., and there never was one. And I think that was honestly for the better. Also, that would be going under the mindset that the Quakers would work with the Baptists, and the Baptists would work with the Catholics, which would have never happened, and it never did happen. And that's why there was separation of church and state, because everyone was scared that the Baptists, who at that point were becoming a larger group, or the Quakers, or really any group, was going to start leading the country and start imposing themselves on everyone and oppressing them. So that's why there was a separation of church and state. And honestly, I think that's great. I know a lot of, well, I don't know if a lot of people, I feel like some people nowadays are kind of not into the idea of church and state. I promise you, it's a lot better to have a separation than to not have one, because everyone's into the idea of having church and state be the same thing until the church goes against your beliefs, and then it's not a good thing. And that's why I think it should remain divided, where it's two separate things. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Nestors, who puts in a 15 shekels, and they are from Israel as well.
Hey!
We have multiple Israeli viewers tonight, and it's good to have you. And I said, Enforcer Matt, please take a question from the live chat, and thank you. And we sure will, and thank you very much for that support. And the question from the live chat goes to Cad in X, who says, when these missiles shoot down a drone, how much debris from the missile end up coming down?
All of it. That's all of it, just in little pieces, because when it explodes, usually the explosion of the surface-to-air missile and the missile itself usually vaporizes it into smaller pieces, so there's not like a large piece of dangerous debris falling, but there are shards of the stuff, so, you know, don't look up for a while, because it's still falling to the ground. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well, and thank you so much once again for sponsoring that live chat, and also thank you for being one of the viewers from Israel, and also throwing in shekels, because the symbol for shekels is really cool. Like, I think it's probably one of the neatest currency symbols there is. But with that, we're on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Margaret Hemsley, who puts in a $14 donation. And thank you very much, Margaret, as always, for that support. And she says, be who you are and say what you feel, because those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. Dr. Seuss. Excuse me, Dr. Seuss.
Dr. Seuss? What
I
the
read
hell?
that totally wrong, man. Dr. Seuss. Take a live chat question. Dr. Seuss, I'm telling you, he's a great guy, great poet. Oh, yes. Great poet, great guy. He's an excellent Navy SEAL. He's a great guy.
Oh my lord, man. Dr. Swees. That's a Dr. Swees.
And now if you look at the spelling and you don't see it in context of some crazy looking drawing or something like that, it looks like Swees, but it's Seuss.
It does. It actually does. I'm not gonna rat on you that bad for that one, but I gotta admit, man, that was pretty funny. Dr. Swees. It's like, who the hell is Dr. Swees? But still, thank you so much for the support, Margaret, and encouraging us to do what we do. I believe in that entirely, and that's one thing that I've never really relented on, is making sure that we do what we feel we have to do or what we want to do. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and of course, being a channel legend. And so with that, thank you so much once again. That does address that fairly well. And Matthew, I heard that there was a new brand of knives out there. It's the Swiss Army knife.
Man, get out of here. Man, you know, Dr. Seuss was one thing, but you hadn't heard about Dr. Swees yet. I'm telling you. I'm telling you. Dr. Swees coming in with those new lines. You know, the eggs aren't green with Dr. Swees. The eggs are red.
Man, Dr. Swees is to Dr. Seuss what Mr. Pip is to Dr. Pepper.
True that. Dr. Swees is writing about the orc in the hat, not the cat.
Man, with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $10 super chat from Junebug72, who does not leave a comment, but thank you very much, Junebug, for that support. And we also have a $10 super chat from Jason Carpenter, who says, we can only turn the other cheek for so long, and Iran needs to learn who not to mess with. And love the show, guys, and thanks for the news.
And I'd agree. We can only turn our cheek so long to provocations. And regardless of the words of the week, who insist that we do not respond to direct attacks against U.S. forces, those are American men and women over there. Those are your family that are over there right now in those bases that are getting attacked by Iranian-backed terrorist groups. For that alone, on that premise alone, there must be a response. Because I'm not into the idea of letting a single American citizen, soldier, politician, whatever they may be, go overseas and get injured or wounded or killed by some other group and then just chalking it up to that is what it is. Not into that at all. I never will be. You know, other countries may do that. Other countries may sign off their people to death warrants if they travel abroad and just tell them that's their problem. Not us, and I'm not ever going to accept that. And I don't think we should turn the other cheek to Iran. I think there should be a response. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Sidekick Armadillo, who puts in a $10 super chat. And Sidekick, I do see your comment, and I did see that news, but I think we're going to steer clear of covering that tonight until more information comes out. But thank you very much for the support, and we do appreciate it very much. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from France Jensen, who says, here, some help to keep you going.
And thank you so much, France Jensen, for the help in keeping us going. The support, of course, does help the channel to keep on running day in and day out. And if it wasn't for folks like you who threw in a little bit of support here and there, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running. And so thank you so much once again, and I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from AMX10 Speedy Bang Bang, who says, unfortunately, I haven't seen enough Speedy Bang Bang from the AMX10. That might also be because the role they undertake is often not filmed. And also, I think the role, the AMX10 is that thing that they, that has like the really light armor and they run it to the front lines, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, I think they're abusing those things a little bit badly because that's really not what they're supposed to be used for. But Enforcer, what say you?
Man, you know, I remember that one time that the Ukrainians got them and they went, hey, thanks. And then they went, hey, this thing is garbage. We're putting this thing on the front lines like a main battle tank and it's getting killed. It's like, it's a light tank. It's like, you're not supposed to be doing that. What are you doing? I don't even know how in the world that oversight was, what happened even, because they were trained by the French how to use them. And the French had to have told them, this is a light tank, by the way, y'all. It may look like a tank, but it got no armor. This thing's just meant for recon and maybe, you know, a hit and run here and there. And then the Ukrainians went, oh, okay. And then they said, all right, we're putting this thing in the armor brigade as the main battle tank. And then they used it like that. And then it ended up not doing too well. I think that's also why we don't see a lot of them anymore, is because I think the Ukrainians don't really like them much anymore because of the doctrinal misunderstanding they had that was honestly their own fault. Because it's clearly a light tank just by weight classification alone. But still, that may be why we're not seeing a lot of the Speedy and the Bang Bang. But still, thank you so much once again for support AMX10 Speedy Bang Bang and keeping this channel running. Of course, one of our New Zealand members of the Lee Spring Army. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, Nestor's, I did a rough translation in my head, so
I'm guessing it was 16 shekel. It was somewhere around that mark. But I'm doing it in my head, and I really don't know the translation rate between the shekel.
Actually, he threw in 100 shekels, which would turn into about $16.
Ah, so $16. Nice. I don't remember what I said, but was I
you
close?
were saying that 100 shekels translated into 16 shekels. So they're like, man, 16 shekels is all you got? No. We got 100 shekels, but after YouTube takes their cut, we get 70 shekels, and then that translates into US dollars, which would be like $12 or something like that. So that's the actual translation. Sorry, Nestor, there was a little bit of an error there. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Margaret Hemsley once again, who puts in a 15 and says, I meant to put in a $30 super chat, and sorry, and take a live chat, please. And thank you very much, Margaret. And Enforcer, what say you?
And thank you so much, Margaret. And also, that's perfectly fine. I wouldn't have known anyway, so we were thankful for any support. But we will make sure to take a live chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and the live chat question is going to go to Leonce Pierre, who says, hello, Enforcers. I noticed that one of your polls included it could backfire on Israel as an option. Do you mean that they might be surrounded by enemies that want them dead? I mean, that is Israel. And thoughts?
I
would say personally that even though Israel may be in the right, any type of military action can always backfire because you don't know exactly what's going to happen. And when you got so many different actors involved in this conflict, you don't know who's going to get involved or what they're going to do or anything like that. So even though they're in the right, still can't say that it's a guarantee that's going to go perfectly right.
And that's something I have to say as well, because everything can go wrong. And so I think they'll probably end up doing quite well as long as it remains confined to the boundaries of Israel, the Gaza Strip, and the West Bank. But if it goes on beyond that and into a region-wide conflict, I think they're largely going to have to rely on the United States to do a lot of the legwork outside of Israel. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one goes to StrayCat241, who puts in a 10 and says, do you think at some point the U.S. public will have to conserve for the war effort like World War II? And do you think we should boost weapons building, construction, and training to build such weapons?
Yes, I think that we should immediately do that right now. I think the Defense Production Act should be brought into effect today, right now, like at this very moment. I think that should start. And I think that we should hold off rationing until a war begins. And we also need to wait. We don't need to do that immediately because it may be for naught. We might want to wait about 2 or 3 months and see what the situation is looking like as far as the war effort in the Middle East. And then if it starts going very badly, or if things start to turn into a world war, then rationing needs to be brought in immediately. So I hope that answers the question, and I thank you once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from Ed. It is Irish Ed. He says,
Hey!
LSA, Irish Ed from Pennsylvania here, and I think Mrs. Silence Dogood absolutely was for separation of church and state, and however, most founders wanted to believe into supreme God.
And I thank you for the support, Ed, and helping the channel to keep on running. And you are correct. Really quickly, I will take a moment. First Amendment of the Constitution, of the Bill of Rights, actually. Let me go there. So here it is right here. This is from the National Archives. This is the direct text that is inside of the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. But the most important part is the first part right here. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Meaning that does not put the church above the state. That puts the church completely separate from the state. Not below it, but completely separate. It's its own thing. The government's not going to get involved, and it's not going to condemn a religion, and it's also not going to elevate one above the other. That's why that's never happened. I've seen some folks in the live chat, and they are continuously saying to folks that this is something that the United States is. It officially recognizes a religion. That is not true. And also, I had to learn specifically about that. There was an entire class that I had to take in college on that specific thing, religiosity and the history of religion in 18th century and 19th century America. And it is very clear that Enlightenment thinkers, like the Founding Fathers were, and the Revolution wouldn't have happened if they weren't if they weren't Enlightenment thinkers, they would have never been into the idea of having an official religion, because that would have been an old way of thinking. The new way of thinking was that there should be a division of the church from the state, and that should be the way things are. It's a freedom of religion, like Terrence Custer said. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for support, Irish Ed, and you are correct. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, we're going to speed up slightly because we actually have 16 super chats left, and this one goes to New Jersey UFO Secret Space Chemtrails, who puts in a 10 and says, "Just want to say your show helped me take a lot of my mind off my issues, and tell Enforcer my favorite voice is the clueless Russian soldier, and do what you want to take question from chat."
Hey, thank you so much for enjoying the Clueless Russian. I'm glad you like it. Some people don't. And also, thank you so much once again for supporting this channel and helping us to keep it running, and also the kind words as well. And we will make sure to get a live chat. So with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And the live chat question goes to Panama Floyd, who says, "What do you think the Rasputitsa will do to the trenches?"
The Rasputitsa is going to turn them into a slush-filled trench, really a sewage ditch like we saw last year. And so with that, I hope that answers that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next super chat question is going to go to Rob Eisman, who puts in a $10 super chat. And it's good to see you once again, Rob. And he says, "Hey, fellow warriors, the world is tearing itself apart, and we all have thoughts and opinions, but I don't want to lose another fellow warrior, and let's not tear ourselves apart as the defeatists, and that's why we're here."
And thank you so much once again for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. And also, I would say that, you know, we wouldn't want to see that either, but of course, one has to stand up for one's nation, and, you know, that isn't bloodless. That sometimes does come with cost, and I don't believe that we should allow American soldiers to be wounded in the Middle East and turn a blind eye to that just because we don't want to get involved in an even larger war. These people are attacking us, and we have to respond. We have to defend ourselves. And so with that, I thank you for the support. I do understand where you're coming from, though, and it is an honorable position for sure. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And this one goes to David Huss, who puts in a 15 and says, "What are your thoughts on the IAF extensive raid into North Gaza with armor and troops tonight, which was the largest since the start?"
We actually didn't hear a lot about that, specifically when I was making the news. That may have happened while we were live. And so, unfortunately, David, I would have to declare ignorance on that one because I wouldn't have enough information to be able to talk about it. And so with that, thank you for the support. I hate that I can't answer that question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Harvey the drummer, who puts in a 10 and says, "Here's some pizza and the beer money, and can you explain a World War III scenario if things keep going downhill, specifically how allied countries will get pulled into the current conflict in the Middle East?"
And I thank you so much for the support, and thank you for the coffee and beer money. We don't drink beer, but I will get a root beer on you, and so thank you for that. And to try and put this out there as quickly as possible, because we are massively overtime tonight, and we still got a good ways to go. The United States will be the first to get involved. The European Union will largely operate as its own apparatus. The British probably will join America before the rest of the European Union does. It's almost an individual nation state now outside the European Union, so it's kind of a free agent as far as that goes. They probably would get involved in spirit, but they would have to rearm a decent bit, which would keep them out of the war for a little bit, maybe about 6 months to a year. The European Union would probably join after that and probably get involved quicker than the UK, at least on the ground, because they would consolidate their forces kind of into what could be called a European Union federal army, which is about the best way I can explain it. Or they would just fall under direct NATO command under the United States, and then their forces would go. And so with that, I hope that does address that as best I can and as quickly as I can. And thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Drew Watkins, who puts in a 10 and says, "Have y'all addressed the recent steak and lobster dinner aboard the USS Ford?" And I'll have some of that.
And I did not hear about that, but I would have some. Oh, wait a minute. No, I remember it now. The steak and the lobster, the overcooked steak, and then that lobster. I saw the picture. I know what you're talking about. Someone put out a picture, Matthew, by the way, just to give you a little bit of context, of a steak that was cooked so well, it may as well have been burnt. And also a lobster that kind of looked meh. As far as the lobster goes...
I'll take a burnt lobster if someone wants to give it to me.
As far as the lobster goes, hey, I mean, who can complain? It's a lobster. But as far as the steak went, it was overcooked, I'm not going to lie. And it didn't really look that great. But smack some Tabasco on that thing, you'll be fine. Of course, I think that's more so of a fault of the cooks in the Gerald R. Ford's kitchen, more so than anyone, because it didn't look like a problem with the steak necessarily. It looks like the thing was just overcooked. Also, by the way, really quick note to put out there, because of the volume of food that the military usually has to cook up for enlisted personnel, most meats are just cooked well done, just because it's a lot easier to just pump out industrial levels of food and make sure that they're all cooked the same. So there isn't any, on an aircraft carrier, at least for the enlisted members of the Navy, there is no, hey, I'd like a medium rare or a medium well done. There's none of that. It's all well done because they can't, customize your food to your specific taste. There's just too many people to feed. Officers, however, they do have an exception. Officers do get to take selections on how they would like their food to be cooked, and all that. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Tabasco would fix it, or A1 sauce. A1 sauce is also a great recommendation as well. And so with that, hope that does address that well. Hopefully the cooks will get better. And with that, thank you once again for the support. And we're on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Margaret Hemsley, who puts in a 7 and says, Dr. Seuss, you have to be odd to be number 1. I'm odd, and you're number 1. Live chat question.
All right, and thank you so much for the support, and thank you for saying that. And we will make sure to get a live chat. And so with that, what do we got?
And this one goes to Sammy J, who says, did you see the reports that Hamas met with Pudler last month?
I didn't. And if they did, that's very interesting. I think that's about the best hardline connection we have in between Hamas and Russia so far. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Dark Warrior 137, who puts in a 5 and says, Russia says, give me a Landbliet. And Ukraine says, best I can do is give you a Darwin Award.
And they got it. And so thank you so much for the support. Thank you for throwing that in. I like it. I respect it. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we got a 5 from Walter A. Lakota Jr., who says, Aloha, Enforcer Matt, and LSA from OG Ellison Bosun. He says, on a ship, USNS Vadim KR Wheeler, TAK 5001, here in Bremerton, Washington. And look it up if you have the chance.
And I found it immediately. This is a cool one, Matthew. That is neat.
Oh, that is cool. It looks like one of those ships that lays cable, maybe, or something.
Let's see. It's a military sea lift command offshore petroleum distribution system and is a part of the 31 ships in the military sea lift command's pre-positioning program.
Got Ukraine colors on it.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? It has the blue and the yellow. It really does. That's pretty cool. But what does this thing really do? Because that name is so long, it kind of threw me for a loop. Ship was built. It was brought to the United States, supported combined logistics over the shore, South Korea, military operations. So really, it's a petroleum ship, from what I'm understanding. Clarify that for us if you want, Walter A. Lakota, because I'm having a really hard time figuring out what this thing's actual job is. Although its name describes it, it's just not translating for me right now. But still, really cool to know that you've switched from the USNS Loyal to the USNS Vadim KR Wheeler. Really cool, and I hope you're having fun out there. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. And also, we are so happy to have the OG Ellison Bosun with us tonight. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Hoodoo, Texas, who puts in a 5 and says, we actually don't have to have the former reserves because we are bleeding Russian reserves far more quickly.
And that's true. That actually is true. And so with that, thank you for support. And thank you for throwing that in for us to remember. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And big shout out to Teslans, who puts in a $5 super chat without a comment. And thank you very much, Teslans, for that support. We also have a 5 from StrayCat241. We have 2 of them. The first one says, Iran is flying F-4 Phantom still. Why do you think we are still giving so much leeway on their attacks against us?
Probably for that reason. I mean, that's a pretty good rhetorical question. The best aircraft they have are F-14 Tomcats, which are way obsolete at this. I know the F-14 is beautiful, everyone. It is the most beautiful plane that ever flew, but it's also very obsolete at this point, no doubt about it. And also very expensive to operate and maintain. And knowing that, that's probably why we are giving them leeway. You got a good point, Stray Cat. And so with that, thank you for the support. We are on to the next one.
And the next one also goes to Stray Cat and says, Hamas attack Israel, but cannot even come close to holding the territory. And do you think it was just a setup so they can cry Israel is a bully?
Probably so, because that's kind of what they do. A lot of people love to be professional victims, and I think Hamas is the best at it. And then they make people who aren't even Hamas the victims so they can cry for them. They attack Israel, they set up their weapons bases near innocent civilians, and where innocent civilians will always be, like a kindergarten. Israel hits their position, it ends up damaging the kindergarten, wounding some kids, and then Hamas goes, look what they did to us! They're trying to kill us! And really, it was them trying to kill the Israelis first, and then they responded, it's a whole thing. Still gotta say, don't like seeing kids or civilians or citizens of any kind getting injured anywhere, but, it's the reality of Israel for the large part, and it makes it a very tough thing to deal with. And so with that, Hope that does address that well, and thank you once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And with that, we are on to this one, which goes to Gerald Mansfield, who puts in a 2 and says, how fast will an Mi-8 travel 15 feet off the deck?
And about, I think they can go about 130 miles an hour at their top speed. So pretty freaking fast if you wanted it to. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Wapalong Cassidy, who puts in a 2 and says, Palestinians and Jews coexisted in ancient time.
Yes, they did, actually. Back when Muhammad was actually conducting his... Actually, it was after Muhammad. It was right after Muhammad. When the Muslims were conducting their jihads of the land, they actually did invade the area formerly known as Judea Palestinia or something like that. That was the name of the Roman province, and they took it over. And due to the time of specifically how Islamic doctrine worked then, religious doctrine, the Jews and the Christians in the area were actually allowed to peacefully coexist. But they did have to pay a special tax to the Muslim administration in charge of the region, and also Christians and Jews had to be subservient to Muslims in public. So while it's a lot more tolerant than many religions were, including Judaism and Christianity were at the time to each other, at least at that moment, it still was oppressive, by modern standard. But, back then, you're working off of a comparative standard, they were actually pretty accepting and pretty open to people having different religious views, which was actually quite shocking, especially for the 600 ADs. But with that, I hope that does address that further well. And that is absolutely correct as well, historically. And thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Midget Hobbit, who puts in a 2 and says, Erdogan is Walter Frey of the Game of Thrones.
I don't know anything about the Game of Thrones, but I'll agree with you. And so thank you for the support. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And moving on to our live chat questions tonight, we had Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Paul Schultz, and also, I believe, Kevin J. as well, who solved the Morse code and says, tonight's Morse code says, may Israel prove victorious in these coming weeks, and may the U.S. stand strong. Long live the LSC.
That's the sound of money, and y'all got that dead on the nail. And I got to congratulate y'all for getting the Morse code message correct on the 609th day of the war. And so thank y'all so much once again. And with that, we're going to be getting to 3 live chat questions that we're going to be running out the stream due to a massive amount of overtime. And so with that, we're on to the first one.
All right, and we only have 2 to cover, and the first one goes to Junebug72, who says the French Navy had set off to Israel, and is NATO preparing for war in the Middle East, and so many players are showing up?
I would have to say we most likely are, because it appears that the situation is getting very tense and very severe very quickly, and based on what we've seen with Iranian attacks on U.S. bases, it does appear that this is most likely going to lead to an inevitable war, at least at this point. Hopefully we're wrong, though, because I'm entirely open to the idea of being wrong on this, and I hope that I am. And so with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to, actually, it's the last one of the night, so would you like to do the thing?
And so we are on to the final question of the night. So who is the lucky last person through in the lucky last question of the night?
And this viewer is I Am Gift Bearer, who says, have you gotten any information on what percentage of Hamas has been eliminated?
We haven't. I don't think we'll ever get a good number on that either, because I don't really know if Hamas is being open about their casualties. I would assume that some percentage of it's been knocked out, but not enough of it. And hopefully the Israeli ground forces will be able to clear up that issue here soon. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, although we don't have a clear answer to that question, sadly. I don't even think the Israelis really know the answer to that. But with that, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. A 3-hour-long stream. We're almost getting back to the good old days when these things used to be 3.5 hours long a pop. But still, I thank you all so much once again for watching tonight. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be able to run this news for each and every one of y'all tonight. If y'all did enjoy, please make sure to hit the like button, make sure to subscribe, and make sure to follow this channel and hit the bell button, because we run these streams 6 days a week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time every single day except for Monday, and we also put out short war summaries as well as often as we can, which hasn't been often lately, but it will start to be often again here soon. And so with that, thank you all so much once again for watching. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, God bless Israel, and God bless the United States. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army never dies.
And good night to you, critters. We'll see you all tomorrow. Slava Ukraine. God bless Israel. And also, Dr. Suisse says good night.
Yes. The Lee Spring Army sends its regards.